Chapter 1569. However, he did not expect the great Ming dynasty to be so courageous. It could also be said that the two emperors of the great Ming dynasty were people who would not shed tears until they saw the coffin. They were not frightened by the strength of the five-star army, and even wanted to struggle. Since that was the case, Yang Chendong would not go easy on them. Taking care of the three provincial kings first was to make an example out of them. No matter what, Zhu Huiqiu was still a descendant of the Zhu family. Although he killed his brother, it did not change the fact that he was a member of the Zhu family. Yang Chendong only hoped that after taking care of Zhu Huiqiu with an iron fist, Zhu Qizhen and Zhu Qiyu could see the difference between them and finally surrender peacefully. Looking at the bright moon, Yang Chendong stood with his hands behind his back. His whole person was enveloped by the moon. The three provincial armies' attack was still ongoing. They had the idea of using manpower to consume firearms and ammunition. Wave after wave of attacks did not stop. But Daojiang's team had already been replaced. After repelling 4 waves of enemy attacks, the soldiers were very tired. Firing guns for a long time was also a physical activity. It was normal for their arms to be numb and their hands to be weak. At 2:00 in the morning, Dao Xiao brought another 100 black cavalry to replace them. When dawn broke, the attack of the three provincial armies finally came to an end. The entire courtyard was filled with corpses, and there was even a tall pile of corpses. The stench was so strong that it could be smelled from miles away. It was really nauseating. Outside the courtyard, Wang Zhanjiang was pinching his nose as he ordered the soldiers to clean up the battlefield. Below the courtyard wall, countless corpses were piled up. They were all the soldiers of the three provincial armies who had died last night. Looking at the corpses, Wang Zhanjiang's face was bitter. His legs were a little numb. In just one night, out of the 15,000 soldiers from the three provinces, more than 12,000 of them had died. This was because he had intentionally slowed down his attack speed in the later stages of the battle. Otherwise, he was afraid that not a single one of the remaining 2,000 or so people would have survived. 15,000 against 500. With a ratio of 30-1, Wang Zhanjiang's side actually lost 5/6 of their soldiers. Not to mention that Wang Zhanjiang had never fought such a war before. He had never even heard of it. He did not know how to face Zhu Huiqiu and explain to the king. Clean up the battlefield. Make sure to clean up the corpses. At the same time, stay far away from the courtyard. Give the enemy enough time to clean up the battlefield. After giving this order to the soldiers below, Wang Zhanjiang urged his horse to head towards the three provinces. Not long after Wang Zhanjiang left, a raging fire also ignited in the small courtyard. The number of soldiers in the black cavalry was limited. Naturally, they could not bury all the enemy corpses that had charged into their ranks. Considering that the weather was starting to heat up, they were afraid that the corpses would attract a plague. After reporting to Yang Chendong, the soldiers used a large fire to solve the problem. They burned all the enemy corpses with cremation. The smell of the burning corpses was quite unpleasant. When a breeze blew, the air in the entire southern cloud manor changed. Therefore, no matter whether it was near or far from the small courtyard, the people in the city all knew that someone had attacked the small courtyard where Bugnam of Gojoseon lived last night. Immediately, for their own safety, many people walked onto the streets and asked for help from the three provinces. Zhu Huiqiu had expected the people's actions. In the morning, he sent another general, Kai Wenju, to lead 5,000 soldiers to tightly seal off the main streets near the three provinces to prevent anyone from disturbing him. As for himself, he summoned Chen Tian, Mengneng, Wu Yingtu, Mo Gui, and General Wang Zhanjiang, who had just arrived to report. His right-hand men all arrived. The servants of the manor served tea and snacks. everyone sat together to discuss the next step. Just as everyone's attention was on Wang Zhanjiang's report, the servants left one by one. One of the stewards first went to the servants' room to say goodbye, saying that he was going out to buy some things. Then he walked out of the manor openly. This steward's name was Zhu Changzhou. He had been with Zhu Huichen for more than 10 years. He was definitely an old man. This could be seen from the fact that he was given the surname Zhu. He also enjoyed a certain amount of power in the manor. For someone like this, his every move would not be suspected. However, this Zhu Changzhou had actually been bribed by Yang San. Yes, bribed. In order to get in touch with this person, the intelligence department spent a lot of effort. Yang San specially appointed a group of 7 people to get in touch with this person and related matters. For the sake of confidentiality, this group of 7 people was directly led by Yang San. In the entire Yangxie, other than Yang San, only Yang Qindong knew about this matter. However, he only knew about the existence of this group. As for who the specific members were and who they were in contact with, Yang Qindong did not know. This operation could be said to have reached the highest level of security in order to prevent information from leaking out. In the situation of knowing that there was a traitor, but not knowing who it was, Yang Qindong could not completely trust anyone. It was such a small group that did a lot of work for Zhu Changzhou. They investigated everything related to this person's life. It was not easy to find out that before this person came to Zhu Huichen, he had a sister who was 3 years younger than him. At that time, because the family was hit by a flood, the two were separated during the escape. There was no news for a long time. When this news was seen by Bureau Chief Yang San, he felt that there was a lot to be done. At that moment, he put in a lot of effort and mobilized a lot of manpower and material resources to investigate this matter. His hard work paid off, and he really did manage to find out. Coincidentally, this woman was still alive, and she even came to Crimson City by accident. Now, she was already married, and she was a middle-level leader in the textile factory. After hearing this news, Yang San was overjoyed. He brought all the information and paintings about this woman, which was Wang Ling, to Yunnan Manor. Under the arrangement of the 7 small secret group, he met with Zhu Changzhou, this person whose original name should be Wang Chang. When Zhu Changzhou was blocked by Yang San in an alley, he instinctively wanted to shout. Based on his familiarity with the surrounding environment, he knew that there was a street 30 steps behind him. There must be soldiers patrolling on the street. His shout was likely to attract their attention. Just when Zhu Changzhou wanted to shout, Yang San handed over the paintings in his hand. There were a total of 4 paintings. One of them was Wang Ling's current appearance, another was a painting of his parents together in his memory, another was a painting of her and her brother, who was Zhu Changzhou, playing by the river in front of the courtyard when they were young, and the last one was a painting of Zhu Changzhou before they separated. Wang Ling was now a middle-level leader in the textile factory. Her husband's family was an ordinary leader in the city lord's residence. She also gave birth to 3 cute children, and they were all studying in Yangxie's school. It could be said that she had received a lot of favors from Yang Qindong. Now that there was something that needed her help, she would do her best to help. When the 4 paintings appeared in front of Zhu Changzhou, the door of his dusty memory was opened. For a moment, he shut his mouth. Just like this, Zhu Changzhou, who didn't resist, had a long chat with Yang San in a secret and safe place. When he found out that his sister was living well and had given birth to 2 little nephews and a niece for him, Zhu Changzhou cried tears of joy. All these years, it wasn't that he didn't think of looking for his sister. This matter had even alarmed Zhu Huiyun. He had sent people to look for her, but there had been no news. Over time, everyone thought that this woman must have died and was no longer in this world. But happiness came so suddenly. Tell me, what do you need me to do? Zhu Changzhou was also a smart person. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been recognized by Zhu Huiyun. He looked at Yang San and asked in a deep voice. Outsiders didn't know what the two of them talked about. Anyway, after Zhu Changzhou left the house, he became Yang San's spy. His main task was to find out what other forces were secretly in contact with Zhu Huiyun other than the subordinates of the three provincial kings. Regarding this matter, Zhu Changzhou felt somewhat guilty. After all, Zhu Huiyun had treated him well. But when he thought of Yang San's promise that not only could his sister live a better life in Qiqian City, but after the matter in Yunnan, he could also go to Qiqian City to reunite with his sister. In the end, his emotions won over his rationality. Moreover, he only wanted to find that mysterious person, not to do anything to Zhu Huiyun. After thinking this through, Zhu Changzhou accepted this task. Today, he left the mansion to report to Yang San. This was the first time he saw Mo Gui in the main hall. Judging from everyone's reaction, this should be the person Yang San was talking about. In the past, Mo Gui had been hiding in the three provincial kings' mansions. Because he lived in a place where outsiders couldn't get close, Zhu Changzhou didn't know. Yang San spent a lot of effort, but still couldn't get any news. But now, perhaps because Yang Qindong was surrounded in the courtyard, everyone thought that he couldn't escape. So they didn't hide Mo Gui and let him come out to meet everyone. Even so, if it weren't for the spies in the king's mansion, it would be impossible to find out about this person's appearance. In the king's mansion, Zhu Huiyun didn't know that Mo Gui had been exposed. He was listening to Wang Zhanjiang's report of last night's battle. When they heard that after a night of fighting, after launching more than 10 attacks and losing more than 12,000 men, they still couldn't break through the defense line set up by the black cavalry dragon guards, everyone present fell silent. Obviously, the reality was different from what they had expected. The black cavalry dragon guards were not as limited as they had imagined. On the contrary, they should have had plenty of gunpowder. Now that they had the same idea, he believed that Mo Gui would do something to help him. Your Highness, my master has just sent a batch of cannons. They are in a workshop in the east of Yunnan Prefecture. I'll have to trouble General Wang to make a trip there. Mo Gui was still smiling as he told Zhu Huichun the answer he wanted. What did he mean by just sent a batch of cannons? Only an idiot would believe that. Although the current southern cloud manor wasn't heavily guarded, it would be harder than ascending to the heavens to send something as large as a cannon into the city without anyone's knowledge. This could only mean that the cannons were already in the city, but Mo Gui's master wasn't satisfied with Zhu Huichun's idea, so he didn't reveal his trump card. Zhu Huichun quickly figured out the crux of the matter, but he still pretended to be happy and laughed. Good, good. Mr. Mo's cannons are just in time. General Wang, go to the east of the city immediately and move the cannons outside the courtyard. Tonight will be the night Yang Qindong dies. Yes, sir. Wang Zhanjiang stood up with excitement on his face. He had been worried about what to do at night, looking at the black cavalry. As long as they didn't lack ammunition, it would take a lot of soldiers to charge in. But with the cannons, things were different. With the cannons, they could ignore the enemy's firearms. The courtyard wasn't that big, so they could just bombard it. Then, he could eliminate the black cavalry without touching a single hair of the enemy. With a face full of joy, Wang Zhanjiang accepted the order and left. Not long after, he arrived at the workshop in the east of the city that Mo Gui mentioned. He found 10 cannons and 300 rounds of ammunition in the courtyard. Whether it was the number of cannons or the number of cannons, Wang Zhanjiang was overjoyed. They had wanted to stockpile cannons before, but the southern Ming Empire had imposed a blockade on them. And the five-star army didn't have any intention of selling cannons, so they could only wait. Now that they finally had the cannons, General Wang felt that his body was full of energy. The cannons were found and transported from the east of the city to Yang Qindong's courtyard in the west of the city. The news quickly reached Yang San's ears. The spies he had hidden in the three provinces' armies were finally useful. The news was also sent to Yang Qindong through the radio. Sixth young master, urgent call. Telecommunications director Wang Shan nervously sent the newly copied telegram to Yang Qindong. Don't panic, the sky won't collapse. Yang Qindong said confidently. He reached out and took the telegram. When he read the contents clearly, his eyebrows couldn't help but raise high. Then he fell into deep thought. There were no cannons in the three provinces' armies. The only ones that had been used to attack Beijiang Prefecture had all been blown up. With this hatred, he was determined to uproot Bagnam of Gojoseon. Boom, boom, boom. Under the irregular cannon fire, the outer walls of the four courtyards and the three courtyards quickly collapsed. The solid metal cannons wreaked havoc in the small courtyards as if there was no one there. It was as if they were the boss, and those who blocked them would die. Originally, the three provincial armies did not have any artillery units, and there was no real standard for how to use these cannons. As a result, the cannons that were fired could fly anywhere. This was also why the attack this time was so powerful. After a few waves of attack, the outer walls of the two courtyards collapsed. Many houses were also knocked down by the cannons, causing rumbling sounds of the walls collapsing. Smoke and dust rose into the sky, even though it was the 15th day of the lunar calendar, and the moonlight was very bright. People's vision was still very limited. Looking at this rather spectacular scene, Wang Zhanjiang's heart was filled with pride. He could not wait to see the scene of the Black Knight Dragon Guards being crushed by him. Without the help of firearms, his 10,000 men would only be able to deal with a few hundred Black Knight Dragon Guards. He was confident that he could achieve victory. Each cannon fired a total of 5 cannons, and half of the solid metal cannons were wasted just like that. It also cleared a wide enough space for attack. Wang Zhanjiang immediately stopped the cannons from firing. Then, with a loud shout, the infantry charged forward. Chapter 1571. If they hadn't received the news in advance, it would have been like last night. The Black Cavalry Dragon Guards would have set up a firepower net and blockade outside. In the face of this sudden solid bullet attack, they would have suffered heavy losses. It wasn't impossible for them to lose their defensive line tonight. However, after receiving the news a step earlier, everything was a different picture. Long before the sky turned dark, most of the Black Cavalry had already hidden in the tunnel that Beta Persei had dug. This kind of tunnel was similar to the bomb shelters of the future. Even if it was a burst of fire, it could block it, not to mention a solid bullet. It could not hurt the people hiding here at all. Most of the Black Cavalry were hiding. Only less than 50 Black Cavalry were sent outside. They hid in various houses and used the solid walls to observe the movements outside. This was also to prevent the enemy from launching an attack, so that they could be the first to stop them. It was worth mentioning that these Black Cavalry were no longer holding Type 95 in their hands. Instead, each of them had a rocket launcher. The rocket launcher could easily hit more than 100 steps away. It made them look like they were holding a small mobile cannon with great power. When the cannons of the 3 provincial armies began to fire, the 50 Black Knight Dragon Guards were hiding in the small houses. Although more than 100 solid shells were fired and caused some damage, there were no casualties among the 50 Black Knight Dragon Guards, as they were covered by the strong walls. Only 2 of the soldiers were choked by the smoke and couldn't stop coughing. Then, the assault of the 3 provinces began. The 50 of them immediately fired their rockets, and when the cannons landed in the midst of the enemy camp, the shock waves from the explosion killed, injured, and scattered the black shadows. When the rocket launcher sounded outside, it was equivalent to giving the black cavalry hiding in the bomb shelter the order to charge and counterattack. Everyone came out of the tunnel in a line, each holding a Type 95 or a light machine gun. They found the predetermined position to counterattack and began to madly fire and counterattack. The sound of cannons and concentrated gunfire was constantly heard, giving the charging soldiers of the 3 provinces a head-on blow. Completely unprepared, they were caught off guard. Just the thousands of soldiers from the 3 provinces who were charging at the front were wiped out in a single exchange. Not a single one of them survived. The black cavalry's methods and enhanced firepower really frightened the soldiers of the 3 provinces. They could not help but stop in their tracks. Then, without waiting for orders, they frantically retreated. After a round of bombardment and a round of charge, they had suffered more than 1,000 casualties. When this result was reported to Wang Zhanjiang, it made him even angrier. His face also revealed a crazy expression. Boom, continue to bombard them. Destroy all the houses. I want to see where they can hide. The wave of bombardment just now had already destroyed more than 1/3 of the houses in the 2 courtyards. This allowed the soldiers of the 3 provinces to charge more than 10 steps without any threat. Wang Zhanjiang wanted to use the same method to continue to charge forward, slowly nibbling away the space for the black cavalry to survive, and finally gain the initiative of the battle. The cannons were pushed forward again. Each of the 30 cannons fired 2 shells, which meant 60 solid shells rolled in front of the houses. Without the obstruction of the courtyard walls, more than 10 houses were destroyed. This time, the black cavalry did not have a record of 0 casualties. 2 soldiers were injured, and 1 soldier's injury was not too light. Fire at the enemy's cannons, blow them up. Looking at the rocket launcher, Beta Persei roared in anger. The black cavalry were his good brothers, and Beta Persei knew every one of them by name. Now that his brothers were injured, as the actual commander of the black cavalry, how could he not be angry? The Black Knight Dragon Guards, who were also enraged, fired their rocket launchers. They had been waiting for this order. In an instant, several people rushed forward. Under the moonlight, they came within 80 steps of the 30 cannons. Then, they angrily fired their rockets and smashed into the cannons, causing a series of loud sounds of metal colliding. The sudden bombardment directly destroyed several cannons, and even some of the soldiers standing in front of the cannons were blasted into the air by the powerful explosion. When they fell to the ground, they were already dead. Good job, continue. Seeing that there was an effect, Beta Persei continued to shout excitedly. Several more rocket launchers were fired, and the cannons were destroyed one after another. Wang Zhanjiang saw all this, and it made his heart ache. He only had a total of 30 cannons. This was all he had, and it was also all the property of the king of the 3 provinces. If all these were wasted here, he was afraid that he would not be able to explain it to the king. Therefore, with a pained expression on his face, he ordered his men to continue to charge forward, looking for the black cavalry's gunner, and at the same time, distracting the enemy. Then he led his men to move the cannons back, saving the remaining 12 cannons and the 60 shells that were not destroyed. The black cavalry's full-scale counterattack was effective. They defeated the arrogance of the 3 provinces and took back some territory. But after all, it was a fact that so many houses were destroyed. After waiting for less than half an hour, the 3rd charge, organized by Wang Zhanjiang, began. Moreover, they were under the command of Cheng, who, the elite 1st Regiment of the 1st Regiment of the Cold Front. Back then, Cheng, who had split up the Cold Front warriors and disguised them as local refugees. Furthermore, They had pretended that they were coincidentally found by the army of the three provinces. Just like that, they were captured as able-bodied men. Not only did they successfully enter Yunnan Manor without any checks, they were also stationed in the barracks in the city. Logically speaking, the army of the three provinces had a set of methods to manage the army. For example, after entering the barracks, they had to go through household registration, and so on. With this set of procedures, it would be difficult for the cold front warriors to hide their target. Coincidentally, before the army could do anything, Yang Qindong arrived. This instantly attracted everyone's attention, and no one cared about the new recruits anymore. They also helped Cheng, whose troops cover for him, and stayed in the army. In the past 2 days, the news of Zhu Huihua wanting to kill Yang Qindong had already spread throughout the army. To the ordinary soldiers, this was simply a fight between gods. They only needed to follow orders. The main goal of the Yang Xia had always been to let the Han people live better lives and let them become the rulers of this world. However, to the soldiers of the three provinces who were not Yang Xia soldiers, they did not have the opportunity to experience this kind of glory. On the contrary, they had been receiving military pay from Zhu Huihua, the king of the three provinces. Naturally, they had been paid to do something. However, as 10,000 new recruits, they had not even received a single cent of military pay. This was naturally because they had only been here for a short period of time. However, this gave Cheng Hu and the others an opportunity to instigate a rebellion. If they were dealing with veteran soldiers, Cheng Hu and the others would have to think twice before doing anything. However, they did not have to be so careful when dealing with a bunch of new recruits who had been captured under the same fate. They could do many things boldly. Over the past 2 days, Cheng Hu and the others had been trying to instigate a rebellion. However, to be on the safe side, they did not reveal their identities. Instead, they used the identity of someone who had suffered a similar fate to build a relationship with the new recruits. For something like a grievance gathering, no other army in the Yang Xia had done better than the Lung Feng army. Within the Lung Feng army, the 1st Division had done the best. For example, during their usual training, they had an assessment on how to gain the support of more strangers in the shortest time possible to strengthen their own forces. All of this was now put to good use. Under Cheng, whose persuasion, more than 8,000 of the 10,000 new recruits were convinced. At the very least, the state of society had not reached a point of no return. There were still some honest officials and capable officials. If the great Ming dynasty was really on the verge of collapse, all they needed to do was to say that they would welcome Bugnam of Gojoseon into the city, and the people in the city would be able to make use of them. In order to cooperate with the soldiers of the Lung Feng division, Yang San had used up all his trump cards. However, Zhu Huiqi did not know about this. Perhaps he had never cared about the people in the first place. In addition, an even greater danger was pressing down on him. In the great general's residence in Guizhou, Jiang Wuqing was currently meeting with a guest in the study. As the great general of Guizhou appointed by Zhu Huiqi, Jiang Wuqing's strength was not weak. With 100,000 soldiers in his hands, he was confident. Even he himself was tall and strong, with a dignified appearance. Jiang Wuqing was a forthright person. From time to time, one could hear him laughing loudly. As a result, he enjoyed an illustrious reputation in Guizhou. However, today, he could no longer laugh. This was because a familiar person had appeared in front of him. It was Yao Yingjun. As the Security Bureau's earliest spy, and one of the most successful ones, Yao Yingjun was born with good looks. People called him Pan and the Reincarnation. Using this advantage, he successfully won the favor of Princess Yongsheng Zhu Lian. He was also able to transmit the situation here to the higher-ups of Yang Xia. Everything came to an end after Zhu Huiying killed his brother. After Yao Ingjun received the information from the Security Bureau, he immediately took Princess Yongsheng away. He quickly formed a group of people and had been roaming around Guizhou. At that time, Yao Ingjun could have brought Princess Yongsheng back to Yangxie's territory. Based on the important information he had transmitted over the years, the rewards he received would be enough for him to use for the rest of his life. However, he did not do that. Instead, he continued to be with Princess Yongsheng and raised the banner of opposing Zhu Huiqi. Needless to say, Yao Ingjuan's act had become real. He had really fallen in love with this princess. Because of this, Yang Qindong also made a promise. No matter when, as long as he didn't want to work anymore and wanted to leave with Princess Yongsheng, he would personally give them permission to find a safe place to live the life of a rich man. Even if he surrendered at the mere sight of the wind in order to preserve his life, who could be his opponent? When Jiang Wuqing heard the praises, he did not have any intention of objecting. All of this was the truth. It was placed right in front of them, and they had no choice but to accept it. On this point, even Jiang Wuqing had some admiration in his heart. After praising Yang Qindong, Yao Ingjun continued, "Today, my lord has come to Yunnan Manor. Presumably, I don't need to say more about what will happen next. General, you should know what will happen, right?" Faced with this question, Jiang Wuqing knew that he had to say something. So he said, "Brother Yao, you flatter me. As far as this general knows, my lord has already laid an inescapable net in Yunnan Manor, and Bugnam of Gojoseon only brought 500 followers into the city. Now that 2 days have passed, I'm afraid that Bugnam of Gojoseon is now under my lord's control." Jiang Wuqing only received the news that Yang Qindong had entered Yunnan Manor this morning. At that time, he was indeed shocked by Yang Qindong's spirit of risking his life alone, but at the same time, he was extremely impressed, although Jiang Wuqing did not mention it to anyone else. He knew very well that this time Yang Qindong appeared in Yunnan Manor and made such a risky move in order to save the people of the 3 provinces from the suffering of war. Unfortunately, Jiang Wuqing knew his master very well. This was a master who would kill his own brother without hesitation. Such a person only had interests in his eyes, so how could he be honest? He could not understand. If he could see this point, then the wise Bugnam of Gojoseon should also be able to see it. But why did he still risk his life? Just as he was wondering in his heart, Yao Ingjun arrived. A sense of curiosity arose in his heart. He wanted to see what Yao Ingjun thought about this matter and what he had to say. How could Jiang Wuqing know that it was precisely because he had just received the news from Yunnan Manor that Yao Ingjun appeared in order to force the other party to make a statement at the first moment? After all, Jiang Wuqing was a very magnanimous person who treated the people well. He was considered a good official, so it was better to try to win over such a person if he could. Ha ha ha. When Yao Ingjun heard this, he threw his head back and laughed heartily. Just as Jiang Wuqing was confused and somewhat confused, he suddenly stopped and said, "What's wrong? General, do you think that you can keep my master with the means of the 3 provincial kings? To be honest, since my master dared to enter Yunnan Manor, he naturally made all kinds of preparations. How could he be easily controlled by others? If he did not have such means, how could he have today's achievements?" Jiang Wuqing still believed Yao Ingjuan's words from the bottom of his heart. He also did not believe that Yang Qindong, who had always been invincible, would take such a risk. However, he just could not think of any way to break out of this situation. Out of curiosity, he could not help but ask, "Oh, but what means does Bugnam of Gojoseon have?" Ha ha. Shaking his head, Yao Ingjun did not answer this question. In fact, he himself did not know what means Yang Qindong had left behind. If he did not know the reason, how could he solve other people's doubts? Yao Ingjun, who did not answer this question, only said, "General, just wait for the result." But then he mentioned the purpose of his visit, which was to persuade Jiang Wuqing to surrender. "General, since my master has come to Yunnan Manor, presumably there will be a result soon. And I can say with certainty that the final loser will be Zhu Huihua. Then, may I ask, once the 3 provincial kings are captured, what will the general do?" After saying these words, Yao Ingjun kept staring at Jiang Wuqing's eyes, as if he wanted to find the answer he wanted. What to do? This was what Jiang Wuqing needed to consider. The great Ming dynasty's system valued the civil and despised the military. It was destined that the social status of the military would not be too high. For example, if a scholar made a mistake, he would often be held high and let go lightly. This was because behind him were his schoolmates, fellow townsmen, peers, and colleagues. Even if he made a mistake one day and left a way out, they would all stand up and speak up. On the other hand, if a military general made a mistake, he would often be thrown into a bottomless abyss. It was even possible to go down to the 18 layers of hell. This was especially true for those civil officials. In order to suppress the status and development of military generals, they would spare no effort in using all their strength. This was also the reason why military generals received far less treatment and reputation compared to civil officials, even though they were both subjects. Jiang Wuqing was born a military general. In the past, he did not know how many military generals and ancestors were played in the palms of the civil officials, and even had their families destroyed. Among these people, some really did make mistakes, and some were directly wronged because they offended someone. And even if they really did make some mistakes, should they be punished? Also, should the families of these military generals be so heavily implicated? At best, they would be exiled and made into slaves. At worst, they would be killed. However, because the right to speak was in the hands of the civil officials, even if some military generals had different ideas, they could only endure it in their hearts. Therefore, even though they were both officials, a military general was much more cautious than a civil official. And now, Yao Ingjun was asking him what to do, which made it difficult for Jiang Wuqing. He was indeed promoted by Zhu Huihua. Before this, he was only a chiliarch. Now, he could command 50,000 soldiers and become the general of a province. With this kindness, he indeed had to thank Zhu Huihua. But of all things, Zhu Huihua should not have provoked Bugnam of Gojoseon. Who was that person? He was an existence that could easily destroy grassland wolves. How could their local army compare to such a person? Even if Bugnam of Gojoseon entered Yunnan Manor and something happened. But what about the other people in Yangxia? Would they take revenge? Moreover, he had already heard that Bugnam of Gojoseon had appointed a prince, which was his successor. Would they really collapse? Taking a step back, if Bugnam of Gojoseon's Yangxia collapsed, what good would it do to him? Based on the fact that he had once served Zhu Huihua, not only would Yangxia's people not forgive him, but the civil officials in the southern Ming dynasty would also not let him off easily. If he was lucky, he would be dismissed. If he was unlucky, then he and his family would die. Thinking of his 4 children, the youngest of whom was only 4 years old, how could Jiang Wuqing bear to see them die? Because of him. For some reason, Jiang Wuqing's heart was filled with a sense of desolation at this moment. When he thought that because of him, his family would be implicated and die, he felt a burst of anger in his chest that wanted to erupt. It made him feel a burst of air, and his heart beat rapidly. Jiang Wuqing's heart could be said to be filled with complex feelings, and all of this fell clearly into Yao Ingjun's eyes. He felt that things could be done, so he laughed and said, "General, I don't think I need to say more about your situation. This time, the 3 provincial kings want to be enemies with my master, so they are destined to have a miserable end. How could such an unwise person be worthy of you working your life for him? Why don't you turn back now? Bugnam of Gojoseon said that as long as General is willing to surrender, not only will he not make any mistakes, but he will also give you merit. Even if we are all Han, he will give you wealth and ensure the safety of General and your family. Fortunately, after 2 consecutive nights of attack, the outer courtyard of Yang Chendong's residence has been conquered, and the range of activity has been reduced a lot compared to before. Under such conditions, once the men of sacrifice of the Mu family rushed to Yang Chendong's side, they still have a high chance to kill the target and complete the mission. Let's talk about the 100 ninjas, led by Mo Gay. This is a force that no one knows about. Ninjas are best at hiding. In addition to Mo Gay's arrangements, no one noticed them. Even Yang Chendong didn't know about their existence. What's more worth mentioning is that the leader of this group of ninjas is the special ninja who has been on Yang Chendong's death list. This special ninja, who should have died in the assassination of the Timur Empire's General Mandu Latu, has now come to Yunnan Mansion without anyone noticing. In the dark, he is like a poisonous snake. Once he sees the opportunity, he will decisively attack and release his powerful energy. These 2 dark forces, one left and one right, stared at the dilapidated small courtyard, waiting for the best opportunity to appear. In the small courtyard, Beta Persei, Dao Xiao Ba Dao Jiang, and others were also doing the final inspection. Years of war made them feel as if dark clouds were looming over the city. Everyone knew that the enemy's attack tonight would only be more ferocious compared to the attack of the previous 2 nights. Fortunately, they have enough firearms and ammunition in their hands, which is their strongest confidence. During the day, they have already dug trenches to ensure that the soldiers can hide in them and kill all the enemies under the premise of enough self-protection. Beta Persei leave a gap in the east. It was unknown when Yang Chendong had changed into the golden cloak. Although the sky was turning dark, it was still dazzling. Under the illumination of the remaining light, it emitted a myriad of rays of light, giving people the feeling that he was a god descending to the mortal world. "Young master, you..." Beta Persei was surprised when he heard this. Once a gap is opened, it may give the enemy an opportunity to rush into the small courtyard. If that's the case, it will be too dangerous. Execute the order. Yang Chendong didn't explain too much. Of course, he knew what he was doing. This is indeed a little risky, but if he doesn't do this, how can he find the forces hidden in the dark? Moreover, with his Grandmaster-level skills and the large warehouse that he can use at any time, is there really nothing to be afraid of? Perhaps this is the boldness of the skillful. Not to mention, who doesn't have a backup plan? Since it was Yang Chendong's order. Regardless of whether Beta Persei is willing or not, he can only carry it out in the end. A gap naturally appeared in the east. However, it is not obvious, at least not at a glance. This is exactly what Yang Chendong needs. Chapter 1575. His originally gloomy mood disappeared without a trace because of Beta Persei's interruption. But it was also at this moment that Yang Chendong thought of telling Beta Persei a few words. Otherwise, with this person's character, he would definitely ruin his grand plan. Beta Persei, if the enemy rushes in from the east later, "Young master, I will take them out of here, and you just need to guard this place well. Don't worry about me. Understand?" Yang Chendong said with a serious look on his face. If it were any other subordinate, he would only need to give an order for the other party to carry it out. But facing Beta Persei, who was a straightforward person, some things had to be said more specifically. Why? Beta Persei wanted to get to the bottom of this, but fortunately he still knew his place and immediately shut his mouth. But this did not mean that he had given up. On the contrary, he said carefully, "Young master, isn't this too dangerous?" Why don't you let Dao Xiao or Ba Dao Jiang lead the team? I'd better stay by your side. No need. In order to dispel Beta Persei's thoughts and not let him take the risk, Yang Chendong said in a very decisive tone, "It's not like you don't know young master speed. You can't keep up with me. Okay, just follow orders." Beta Persei's face immediately fell when he heard that he couldn't keep up. In terms of skill and strength, the Yang faction could be considered to be full of talents. Yang Air was considered to be one of the top existences. There were very few people who could convince him to submit. Yang Chendong was an exception. The two of them had exchanged countless moves in private. In the past, they could deal with each other once or twice, but now they could not even last one round against Beta Persei. This made Beta Persei angry and happy at the same time. He was angry because his skills were too weak. He should have been protecting the young master. However, most of the time, he had become an existence akin to a decoration. This made him, who boasted that he was strong enough to establish himself with his fists and feet, lose face. He was happy that the young master had such shocking skills. His safety was guaranteed, so he didn't have to worry so much. In terms of skill, he was indeed not on the same level as Yang Chendong. Although he was reluctant, Beta Persei still agreed. "Yes, young master, but you must be careful. Don't worry. I know what I'm doing." Yang Chendong also breathed a sigh of relief. He was really worried that Beta Persei would disregard his orders and follow him. If that was the case, he would not be able to say anything about Beta Persei's loyalty. Now that he was on his own, he didn't have to worry so much. As for his skills, perhaps it was because he had been reborn, or perhaps it was because he had Daikra with him. In short, whether it was his speed, strength, or reaction time, his body was indeed frighteningly high. They only entered the trenches when it was dark. If they continued to attack in the dark, then even if they died in battle, no one would be able to figure out what method the black cavalry used. Now that the trenches were right in front of him, Wang Zhanjiang, who understood everything, had a better plan in mind. "Men, prepare to light a fire and release smoke." Smoke attack was one of the most commonly used methods on the battlefield. In history, there were many records of victory through smoke attacks. However, because of the many limitations of this method of attack, although it was a good method, there were not many people who used it. But now, the black cavalry was surrounded within a certain range, so using smoke attacks was a good method. Under Wang Zhanjiang's order, the soldiers quickly carried dry firewood and lit it. Then, they continued to add wet firewood to the fire. Soon, smoke rose, and under the incessant fanning of the soldiers of the 3 provinces, the smoke began to blow towards the small courtyard. "They're going to release smoke." With the help of the night vision device, Ba Daojiang, who was guarding the first line of defense, quickly discovered Wang Zhanjiang's intention. However, he did not panic. On the contrary, the corner of his mouth revealed a disdainful smile. At this moment, if Wang Zhanjiang could stand in front of him, he could not help but scold him for his stupidity. In front of long-range firearms, what was the effect of releasing smoke? Did they not know that all they needed to do was to land a shell on the pile of firewood to solve all the problems? Come on, where are the rocket launchers? Aim them at the pile of firewood and blow it up, Ba Daojiang said with a confident face. The rocket launchers beside him immediately got ready. Before the smoke could completely form, the rocket launchers were already fired at the small courtyard, raising the pile of firewood to the ground. Not only did the smoke not have any effect, but more than 10 people were killed or injured because of the rocket launcher. Wang Zhanjiang frowned. He was very curious about how the enemy could see his movements clearly when the sky was dark and the smoke was thick. Although it was the 16th day of the lunar calendar, the time when the moon was full, he shook his head. Shaking his head, he pushed the unhappiness in his heart to the bottom of his heart. Now was not the time to think about this. There was not much time left for him. If he could not take down Yang Chendong tonight, he was afraid that his head would be removed from his body. Men, beat the drums! Charge! Under the illumination of the moonlight, accompanied by the flames everywhere, the soldiers of the 3 provinces began their suicidal charge. Just like a few days ago, the black shadows were everywhere. The soldiers of the 3 provinces pressed forward with a fearless look. Under the supervision of Wang Zhanjiang, the soldiers reluctantly charged forward. Open fire! The 500 black cavalry soldiers were naturally not going to be polite. With a shout, Ba Daojiang, who was in charge of the first line of defense, gave the order to open fire. In fact, after 2 days of fighting, the number of black cavalry soldiers was less than 500. To be precise, 13 soldiers were injured to varying degrees and could no longer participate in the battle. They could only stay in the main courtyard with Yang Chendong. Even so, the 487 black cavalry soldiers were armed with all kinds of advanced firearms. They were like a piece of metal, preventing the soldiers of the 3 provinces from approaching from all directions. Dense gunshots rang out, and the black shadows fell one by one. This battle made everyone realize the importance of weapons. When the weapons were advanced to a certain extent, it was already impossible to make up for it with manpower. The gunshots continued, and the casualties of the 3 provinces continued to increase. When the news reached the ears of General Wang Zhanjiang, he was calm like an old monk and did not even frown. All of this was within his expectations. Although he did not understand where the black cavalry got the firearms and ammunition, he had no choice. In a battle of life and death, in order to give Zhu Huihua an explanation, even if he had to sacrifice all of his soldiers. So what? As long as he could get rid of Yang Chendong, all of this was worth it in his eyes. A general's success was built on thousands of bones. At this moment, there was a clear reflection of the cruelty of war. Wang Zhanjiang personally supervised the battle. If any soldier wanted to retreat out of fear, once discovered, they would be killed without mercy. In this kind of battle where they would die regardless of whether they rushed forward or retreated, the soldiers had no choice. After getting used to obeying orders, they could only hope that they would be lucky enough to break through the blockade of the black cavalry and rush into the small courtyard. The soldiers of the 3 provincial armies, who had no other choice, showed the madness that they should have when they only had one path left to charge. Although the number of dead and injured soldiers kept increasing, after paying a huge price, they finally got closer and closer to the defending Black Knight Dragon Guards. When they were within an arrow's range, all kinds of bows and arrows began to fly, and the pressure began to increase. Chapter 1576. What's going on? Beat them back. Don't let any arrows threaten us. More and more arrows rained down on the trenches. Some of the black cavalry soldiers had already been hit by arrows. Although none of them were killed, more than a dozen soldiers were injured. Some of them even had their arms injured. This made it impossible for them to continue using their firearms in a short period of time. As Ba Daojiang shouted, a look of indignation appeared on his face. However, he didn't have a better idea. Tonight, the soldiers of the 3 provinces were rushing over without regard for their lives. Although the firearms in their hands were very powerful, they had limited manpower. There were less than 500 people, and they needed to guard the 4 directions. It was destined that the counterattack they could make was very limited. Fire 2 waves of grenades in a row. Beat back the enemies that are close to us. Captain Howling Blade had somehow arrived at Ba Dao River and started shouting. Then a wave of grenades was thrown in all directions. Cries of agony were heard one after another. Many of the soldiers from the 3 provinces who wanted to approach them were killed. The situation was stabilized again. Sigh. A heavy punch fell from the sky. Seeing that they were charging fearlessly, the opportunity to defeat the enemy had appeared. However, it was indeed a pity that they had failed because of a wave of grenades. However, Wang Zhanjiang wasn't discouraged. Since they had the opportunity just now, he believed that they would have a second chance if they continued to charge. He continued to give orders. The entire army charged forward without stopping. The battle in the inner circle was in full swing. Outside the small courtyard, the sound of gunfire and cannons had attracted more and more civilians. The appearance of the civilians wasn't that sudden. After all, the same sound had been heard for 2 consecutive nights. Anyone who wasn't deaf could hear it. The difference was that although these people were worried for the first 2 nights, they didn't do anything. But now, the civilians were making a move. From all directions, more than 15,000 civilians rushed towards the small courtyard. General Cai Wenju, who was in charge of the security of the outer circle, didn't look nervous at all. Perhaps this was due to inertia. In front of the army, the civilians were just livestock that could be driven around at will. Men, set up the formation. Archers, get ready. If the commoners dare to come close, shoot them down. Cai Wenju, who was riding on his horse, said calmly. Compared to the civilians who didn't have much fighting power, he was much more fortunate than Wang Zhanjiang, who could die at any moment in the inner circle. Cai Wenju had a calm expression on his face, but if he knew that 1/10 of the 20,000 soldiers under him were cold vanguard warriors and thousands of new recruits had already been convinced by the cold vanguard warriors, he would not be able to remain so calm. As the saying goes, to catch bandits, first catch the ringleader. Cai Wenju didn't know that he had already become someone's target. Cheng, who, the commander of the Cold Front Army's 1st Division and 1st Regiment, was currently hiding in the army, watching Cai Wenju's every move. Anyone who had been in the army knew that one was always the most powerful existence in an army. For example, in a company, if a company's 1st-grade officer died in battle, then the one to inherit their position would definitely be a platoon leader. Logically speaking, if the platoon-level officers all died in battle, the one who would inherit their positions would definitely be the platoon leader. This clearly showed the importance of this platoon leader. For Cheng, who to be able to become the commander of an army's 1st Division and 1st Regiment, his ability was naturally not to be underestimated. Since he had his eyes on Cai Wenju, how could he escape from Cheng, whose grasp when the enemy was in the open and Cai Wenju was in the dark? Attack! Seeing that the commoners were getting closer and closer, and that many of the soldiers from the 3 provinces had already started to knock their arrows, Cheng, who, as the commander, shouted loudly. He drew his scimitar and charged towards Cai Wenju on his horse. With a shout, hundreds of cold vanguard warriors also drew their scimitars and charged towards Cai Wenju. They only had one target, General Cai Wenju on his horse. The formation suddenly became chaotic. Many of the soldiers from the 3 provinces didn't know what was going on. They only felt people charging past them, and if anyone dared to stop them, they would quickly be knocked to the ground and never be able to get up again. This sudden turn of events left many of the soldiers of the 3 provinces scratching their heads in confusion. Before they could figure out what was going on, Cai Wenju, who was riding on the horse, had his head chopped off. Blood sprayed everywhere. Cheng, whose personal strength was naturally unquestionable, just the number of cold vanguard warriors and officers trained by him numbered more than 1,000. Having fought with countless people, he had long trained himself to be invincible in close combat. Coupled with the fact that he was unprepared, it would be strange if Cai Wenju could escape. Without even having the time to react, the commander of the troops, Cai Wenju, was killed on his horse. When the other soldiers from the 3 provinces saw this scene, all of them turned pale with fright. More importantly, the person who killed the general was wearing the same uniform as them. This was the most frightening and inexplicable thing. Why did the soldiers dare to kill the general? If these people dared to kill the general, would they also dare to kill them? Put down your weapons and kneel on the ground. Otherwise, you will be killed without mercy. Waves of shouts came out one after another. More and more recruits with red cloth wrapped around their arms jumped out and shouted. The united front work done before finally played a decisive role at this moment. Chung, whose sudden attack and the active cooperation of his 4 battalion commanders, including Feng Zhan and Wang Jinlong, made the soldiers from the 3 provinces squat on the ground in confusion. Although they still didn't know what was going on, one thing was clear. If they didn't drop their weapons and squat on the ground now, they would die. This had been proven by the fact that their comrades had been killed for no reason. Just now, there were more and more civilians on the periphery, and the soldiers from the 3 provinces were getting closer and closer. Although there were nearly 100 spies from the Security Bureau encouraging everyone to act as the mainstay, when the soldiers from the 3 provinces were getting closer and closer, many civilians couldn't help but slow down. They were civilians and hadn't received any relevant military training. When facing regular soldiers with armor and swords, it would be a lie to say that they weren't nervous. But when they thought that if Bugnam of Gojoseon died in Yunnan Prefecture, the 5-star army would definitely take revenge. At that time, they would also be unable to escape death. Their confidence was strengthened a lot, and they didn't seem to be as scared as before. What's going on? Why isn't anyone shooting at us? Yeah, why do I see that many of these soldiers are squatting down? The distance was getting closer and closer. When they were less than 30 steps away, the civilians at the front finally saw the movements of the soldiers from the 3 provinces. The spies mixed in the crowd played a role at this time, thinking of what the director said before, that someone would cooperate with them. How could they not know what was going on? Immediately, one by one, they shouted in the crowd, "The soldiers are mutinous. They are on the same side as us. Now let's go with them and rescue Bugnam of Gojoseon." As soon as such shouts appeared, they rose and fell one after another without end. All the spies in the crowd also shouted in all directions, hoping to convey this fact to the ears of every civilian so that they could move forward without worry. The fact that there were no arrows from afar was enough to explain everything. After knowing that the soldiers were like them and didn't want anything to happen to Bugnam of Gojoseon, the number of soldiers increased by a lot. They were no longer afraid, and each of them moved faster than before. There was a mutiny on the outside, and it wouldn't be long before it affected the inside. Chapter 1577. He thought that this mission would be very difficult to complete, and the 200 men he brought with him would be thrown here. He never thought that Yang Chendong would actually rush out. Could it be that the Black Cavalry's defensive line was no longer safe? It's just that this is not what Muang should care about now. What he needs to do now is to catch up with Yang Chendong and kill him. Having seen the portrait of Yang Chendong countless times, Muang believed that he would not recognize the wrong person. Therefore, after Yang Chendong, who was wearing a golden cloak, rushed out from the east and kept running away, Muang took him and 200 men under him like ghosts in the night and chased after Yang Chendong. As soon as Muang moved, in the same darkness, the 100 ninjas also moved. For Yang Chendong's appearance and figure, even if he turned into ashes, Byujishi could not forget it. So in just a face-to-face, Byujishi could be 100% sure that the person who escaped was Yang Chendong. Even so, how could he let go of this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity? Yang Chendong appeared, and he was still alone. His appearance also directly attracted the pursuit of 200 men of the Mu family and 100 ninjas. Besides, at this time, Yang Chendong, with the idea of being bold, rushed out from the protection of the black cavalry. The reason why he did this was that he wanted to lure the enemy into the trap, and secondly, doing this could also reduce the pressure on the black cavalry so that he could go all out and fight without any scruples. It's just that when he really rushed out, Yang Chendong was not sure whether someone would chase after him or not. It wasn't until he met the soldiers of the 3 provinces who were charging at him from the outside and used his body to quickly weave through them that he heard the dense footsteps behind him. Only then did a relaxed smile appear on his face. With Yang Chendong's current skill, his hearing was naturally better than ordinary people. Just from the sound of those footsteps, he could feel that the strength of the people who came was definitely not comparable to the ordinary soldiers of the 3 provinces. From the orderly and light footsteps, Yang Chendong could feel that the other party's breathing was very stable. They should be the work of a well-trained master. Thinking that these people were masters, Yang Chendong couldn't help but rejoice in his actions. If it wasn't for this risk, the killers who waited for a long time and didn't have a chance to attack the small courtyard together with the soldiers of the 3 provinces. If so, the loss of the black cavalry would be inevitable. Ha! Come on, I hope you can keep up with my speed. After a smile that others couldn't see flashed across the corner of Yang Chendong's mouth, he stomped his feet on the ground and rushed forward again. They went to one temple after another, and it seemed like they were going to turn this place upside down to find Yang Chendong. In the dark, Yang Chendong's eyes had already been put on the most advanced night vision goggles, and he was watching Muong and Ishiki slowly approaching him. At this moment, Yang Chendong's eyes were filled with an inexhaustible anger, all because he saw Ishiki. Although the other party was dressed in black at this time, and there was a black mask on his face, but just like the other party could easily recognize him, he also recognized the other party. Ishiki is dead. He died in the assassination of Mandu, Latu. This is a well-known thing in Yangxia. But no one would have thought that in order to deter the world, Manto Rado hung all the assassins on the wooden pole to warn the world. Because of this action, the secret agents of the Security Bureau carefully examined the corpses, but they didn't find the leader of the ninja clan, Kuroshio Shinobi. When this information was reported to Yang Chendong, he was a little more vigilant. For this reason, he has taken some precautions, but at that time, Yang Chendong was still optimistic that Ishiki might have been burned, or he might have escaped with serious injuries and died. After all, he is a special ninja, and his strength is not comparable to ordinary people. This was just a kind of hope. However, when Chui Shi appeared in the Xing Wang Temple, Yang Chendong knew that he had been too optimistic. This person is not dead, and he wants to kill him, thinking that if he didn't save him, Ishiki would have died, and there would be no ninja today. And it was his own kindness that led to all of this. The anger in his heart couldn't be extinguished. Yang Chendong hates betrayal, especially after betrayal. They want to harm him. With this, there will be no good result for Ishiki today. Chapter 1578. Get ready to do it. In the end, Yang Chendong shook his head. He knew that those were just memories. Now, it was time to make up his mind to eradicate all of this. Yang Chendong, who seemed to have made some kind of decision, walked out of the darkness wearing a golden robe. As soon as he appeared, the death warriors of the Mu family and the Japanese ninjas who were searching for him couldn't help but exclaim, and then everyone quickly rushed forward and surrounded him. With the help of the torch in his hand, the entire courtyard of the Xing Wang Temple was illuminated, and Yang Chendong's face also appeared in everyone's eyes. When he saw that it was indeed Yang Chendong, Muong was overjoyed. Previously, he had been worried that the person chasing him was fake, and that he would fall for a trick to lure the tiger away from the mountain. But now, he could let go of his worries. On the other side, Blowing Stone, who was wearing a night suit, frowned. The person who came is Yang Chendong, and he is confident that he won't be wrong. But because of this, he couldn't help but mutter in his heart, the other party shouldn't have come out. 1 against 300, and such elite 300 people. Even if they were made of iron, they wouldn't be their opponents. But why did he know that? Why did he come out? Why? Thinking of Yang Chendong's various means before, especially the last time when Ivan's sneak attack failed, and even the 30,000 cavalry led by Yeshen were destroyed, Blowing Stone's face suddenly became ugly. Could it be that this is a trap set by Yang Chendong? When he thought of Yang Chendong's past, for some reason, Blowing Stone had a feeling of panic. Although he glanced around and didn't find anything wrong, he was still very nervous at the moment. Unlike Yang Chendong's men, Muong at this moment appeared in front of Yang Chendong as a winner. Oh, this should be King Wunan of Damyong. I'm Muong of the Mu family. I've been waiting for a long time. The Mu family of Sheeping King? Yang Chendong wasn't surprised when he heard this. He just repeated it and chuckled. Then, he didn't pay any more attention to the other party. Instead, he looked at the area under the rock. What? Friend, are you not going to introduce yourself? Even if you want my life, you should at least let me know who you are, right? Yang Chendong was so calm that people who didn't know would think that this was his home ground. So when they heard this, many of the Mu family's death warriors and ninjas showed resentment on their faces. As ordinary ninjas, although they know that they once worked for Yangxia, they don't know that everything they need for training, such as food, clothing, shelter, transportation, etc., was provided by Yang Chendong. They thought that the upper echelons had no choice but to lower their heads and submit to others in order to survive. In fact, several special ninjas like Kurosawa also said this to the people below. This caused everyone to look at Yang Chendong without the slightest bit of gratitude, only murderous intent and anger. But Chuisho is different from ordinary people. He knows everything. When he saw Yang Chendong's eyes looking at him, he knew that the other party already knows his identity. Otherwise, he wouldn't question him in such a tone. When he thought about how he relied on Yang Chendong to develop and even lived until now, and it was because of Yang Chendong's help, he felt short of breath. Facing this question, he naturally didn't know how to answer. Chuisho didn't speak immediately, which caused Yang Chendong to laugh. What's wrong? Could it be that all of you are mute? Or are you too ashamed to say your name and identity? Yang Chendong deliberately said these words in Japanese. This is also his way of telling Chuisho that this king has already recognized his identity, and there is no point in hiding it anymore. Baka! What is he talking about? Is he looking down on us ninjas? At this time, those ninjas have already exploded. Their dignity will never allow others to judge them like this. But they also know the importance of respect. At this moment, after most of the ninjas vented their dissatisfaction, they still looked at Chuisho. They want him to speak for them. He even spoke in Japanese. Chuisho knew that his identity has already been exposed. It's just that at this moment, he was no longer afraid. Since he made such a choice, he must bear the consequences. So before he came, he was prepared to die, although he didn't think that this trip would be dangerous. After taking a deep breath and calming down, Chuisho finally spoke. Bugnam of Gojoseon, long time no see. I am a special ninja of the Japanese Empire. Chuisho, it turned out to be a ninja. Muong, who saw everything from the side, couldn't help but be surprised. But soon this surprise was suppressed in the bottom of his heart. This time, he didn't want to be enemies with ninjas, but to kill Yang Chendong. As long as he can complete this task, it's just a small ninja whose country has been destroyed. He really doesn't put him in his eyes. You finally dare to admit your identity? But why don't you call yourself a servant? And what Japanese empire did you say? Ha ha ha, wasn't it destroyed a long time ago? Now, it's just a province of Yangxia. Yang Chendong waited for Chuisho to admit his identity. Then he couldn't help but laugh. His words were full of sarcasm and contempt. In the past, these ninjas under the rock claimed to be slaves in front of Yang Chendong, and even if he wanted, these people claimed to be lackeys. But now, these small titles proved their ambition. In the face of these sarcastic words, the other ninjas who understood Chinese naturally couldn't stand it. They all looked at Chuisho angrily. Chuisho wasn't much better. If it was just him and Yang Chendong here, he would just listen to some of these words. But now there are so many ninjas here. He absolutely won't allow anyone to question and disrespect him. So at this moment, he suddenly shouted back, "Bugnam of Gojoseon, the past is the past. Please speak with dignity." "Dignity, bah." Yang Chendong opened his mouth and spat. "A group of people who are willing to be dogs in order to survive. You want others to respect you. You think too highly of yourselves. Let me tell you, a dog is a dog. Even if it's wearing clothes, it's just a pet called by the master. In the face of a master who gives you food and drinks, you have to learn to wag your tail and beg, not to be treated with equal respect like a human, because you don't deserve it." After saying these words, it didn't seem to be enough. Yang Chendong continued to say, "If it wasn't for this king, you would already be dead. How could you have your current scale? Without this king's money, how could you recruit people and train them wholeheartedly? Do you really think you can deny everything just because you've eaten everything?" Facing Yang Chendong's questioning, Chuisho opened his mouth several times to say something, but in the end, he didn't say anything. Yang Chendong was right. If it wasn't for his pity and help, they would have already been killed by the samurai of the Japanese Empire. They wouldn't have been able to survive until now, let alone develop and grow stronger. They were once their benefactors, but now they don't want to repay him. They want to kill their master. What they did was indeed a bit too much. After venting for a while, Yang Chendong's mood seemed to be better. He opened his mouth and said, "All right, let the past go with the wind. Since you have chosen to be enemies with this king, then there's no meaning in saying those things. Now that you have found this king and want to kill this king, can you tell me who ordered you to do this? Oh, don't say no. If you want to train ninjas without enough money, it's impossible. Don't try to fool this king." With a change of topic, Yang Chendong placed the question on the person behind the scenes. This was also the answer that Yang Chendong desperately wanted to know. Wasn't the reason why he took such a risk on this trip for this answer, to find out who the traitor was? Yang Chendong didn't mention the past. He just wanted to know who ordered them to do it. This request was already very low. Before a prisoner died, they were allowed to eat a full meal, not to mention Yang Chendong, who was their benefactor. But he just wanted to know who was behind the scenes. This was not too much. If Chuishiki knew the answer, he would tell Yang Chendong. But unfortunately, he really didn't know. Chuishiki shook his head. "Bugnam of Gojoseon, it's not that Chuishiki doesn't want to tell you. I really don't know. I only know to listen to Emogue's orders." "Emogue? Who is he?" Although Yang Chendong was somewhat dissatisfied with this answer, he also knew that Chuishiki really didn't know. Otherwise, he wouldn't refuse to answer this question. "I don't know who he is. I just know everything. I just listen to him. By the way, he should be in the palace of the 3 provinces now, beside the 3 provincial kings. It's a pity. I'm afraid that Bugnam of Gojoseon will never see him again." Chuishiki said while shaking his head, as if he was going to die here today. He was destined to not know the result. "Emogue, right? I'll remember this name." Yang Chendong nodded heavily, as if he attached great importance to this name. Seeing that Yang Chendong was still hesitating about this matter, seeing that Chuishiki seemed to have answered his question, and seeing that it was getting late, Mu-ong laughed loudly. "Well, Bugnam of Gojoseon, you should know everything you need to know. Now you shouldn't have any last wishes. It's time to go on the road." "Go on the road? With just you? You're just a small child of the Mu family. Do you know that I'm Bugnam of Gojoseon, the emperor of the Great Ming Dynasty, recognized by the emperor of the Great Ming Dynasty, Bai Ming, and the emperor of the Southern Ming Dynasty? Do you know that you're offending your superiors by doing this to me? Seeing that Chuashiki couldn't ask any more questions, Yang Chendong turned his gaze to Muong. Chapter 1579. Muong had never experienced Yang Chendong's methods. He had only heard about them, so Muong was not afraid of him. Seeing that Yang Chendong still wanted to use his position to oppress others, Muong could not help but burst into laughter. Ha ha! Bugnam of Gojoseon? The emperor personally conferred the title. Don't you think it's ridiculous to say this? Don't you know that all this is because you were forced to do so? You're just a courtier. Instead of thanking the emperor for his kindness, you only want to rebel and become the emperor. Now, you still have the face to talk about these principles. Don't you feel ashamed? Muang's scolding attracted a burst of cheers from the men of sacrifice around him. Although they had not made a move yet, it was obvious that their young Master Mu was much better than the special ninja of the Japanese Empire. This was something they should be proud of. Yang Chendong listened to all this carefully, and there was no trace of unhappiness on his face. This was because he knew that Muong wasn't the only one who thought this way. Most of the officials of the Great Ming Dynasty were also thinking this way. This was everyone's intuition about him. He really needed to understand it. It was a pity that Muang's eloquence was only SOSO. After saying this, he shut up. Perhaps he was disappointed that he did not see Yang Chendong flying into a rage, so he lost interest. Why don't you continue? Yang Chendong, on the other hand, didn't seem to have heard enough and asked such a question. This really angered Muong. He had never seen such a thick-skinned person. For a moment, he did not know what to say. He simply did not answer. Instead, he clenched the long sword in his hand and shouted, "What's there to say to a dying man?" "Oh, I see." Yang Chendong nodded, as if he understood, but then shook his head. "I gave you a chance to vent your dissatisfaction. If you don't want to say it, then there's really no chance. However, I have to warn you that your actions will bring disaster to the entire Mu family and Sheeping King. I hope you won't regret it when you meet in the netherworld." "Regret? You should be the one regretting it. At the very least, you should die before us." "Men, do it." Muong didn't want to say anything else. Perhaps because he couldn't see Yang Chendong's fear, Muong felt that it was unnecessary to say anything. It would be better to take him down and cut him into 1,000 pieces. "That's right, we should do it. Do it." As Muang's voice fell, Yang Chendong actually nodded in agreement, and then said the same thing. "Ah." Then the sound of a dying person wailing could be heard. This voice made Muong and Bao Shi, who were about to make a move, freeze. They couldn't help but stop moving forward. Bang! The closed door of the temple behind them was suddenly knocked open from the outside. Then a group of black figures jumped in and blocked the direction of the door. Not only that, at the same time, on the courtyard wall, a group of men in black rushed out from behind Yang Chendong. As soon as they appeared, they surrounded Muong and Bao Shi. The sudden change shocked Muong and Chue Ishida. Their expressions were no longer as relaxed as before. The men of sacrifice sent by the Mu family were all very strong. If they were fighting on the battlefield, any one of them would not be afraid of 3 to 5 people. But those shouts just now were so quick that they almost didn't hear any sound of resistance. They were killed one after another. From this point of view, doesn't it mean that this person's skills were more powerful than theirs? The stronger the enemy, the more dangerous their situation would be. It would be strange if they didn't have a good expression. The only thing worth rejoicing over was that although it seemed like they were surrounded, It was clear that not many people had come. There were only a little over 100 people, which was not even half of their number. It seemed that with the advantage of numbers, they still had a fighting chance. Seemingly at the same time, Muong and Blowingstone's eyes met. Then, almost at the same time, they opened their mouths and said the word kill. They were fast, but some people were faster than them. Those men in black who suddenly appeared, they didn't know when they had the 95 style gun in their hands. Just when those men of sacrifice and ninjas were about to move, a black muzzle was pointed at them. And then there was a burst of fierce gunshots. The bullets flashed in the dark night, and ninjas and men of sacrifice who wanted to rush forward were shot down one by one. Firearms! When they saw the men in black took out these things, whether it was Muong or Bao Shi, their face changed. A strong sense of crisis also pressed down on them, making their originally confident faces lose their confidence. Retreat! Go! Almost one after the other, Bao Shi and Muong gave the order. In their view, although they had the advantage in numbers, in the face of powerful firearms, it was too difficult to win. In that case, it was better to escape first. Anyway, Yang Chendong was still in Yunnan Mansion, so they didn't have to worry about not finding an opportunity to kill him. It's just that, at this time, they still wanted to retreat, but it was not so easy. A smoke bomb was thrown at them. The strong smoke exuded a nauseating smell, and their eyes couldn't help but shed tears of pain. In a short time, most people were hit and lost the ability to resist. Throw the flash bomb. Another voice came out, followed by a series of hand grenades that could blind people's eyes. They were thrown in the courtyard, making those men of sacrifice who wanted to escape in the dark, especially the ninjas, have no choice but to stop. Forget about the men of sacrifice. Their advantage was that they were not afraid of death. When their strength was obviously inferior, they were just like straws that could be harvested at any time. Ninjas were different. What they were good at was hiding or sneaking or running away with the help of various means, whether it was using the surrounding environment or the reflection and refraction of light. In short, when it came to escaping, few people dared to say that they were the best. Not to mention in the originally dark environment. As long as they couldn't be killed in the first place, once they escaped, it would be extremely difficult to catch them. It was precisely because they knew and understood this that those flash bombs were thrown out. When a strong light suddenly came out and met the eyes of those ninjas at that moment, they felt that there was a vast expanse of white in front of them. At this moment, they completely lost their direction, let alone escape. When the flash bombs appeared, the men in black with special goggles moved. They had been trained for this for a long time, and with the protection of the goggles, the flash bomb's damage to them has been minimized. One side couldn't see anything, and the other side's vision was normal, so it was easy to imagine what would happen. The sound of gunshots came out, hitting the legs of the men of sacrifice or ninjas one after another. Soon, the Xingwang temple was dyed red with blood, and a burst of fishy smell also assailed their nostrils, making them want to vomit. Vomit! Those assassins who first experienced the smoke bombs, then the flash bombs, and then the smell of blood finally couldn't stand it anymore. They began to bend down, lowered their heads, and vomited. But even if they had lost the power to resist in a short time, the gunshots still didn't stop. One by one, their legs were penetrated by bullets, and blood flowed out. One by one, they couldn't stand still and fell to the ground. In a short time, the assassins who wanted to resist and break out of the encirclement stopped moving. They fell to the ground one by one, wailing and screaming. At the same time, their bodies were twitching. They didn't know if it was because of the gunshot wounds or because of the smell in their noses. They kept twisting their bodies in pain. Control them all. Seeing that the dust had settled, the group of black-clothed men stopped. One by one, they lit up their torches and began to walk towards the injured assassins on the ground. Fight them to the death. When a black-clothed man came to the side of a death warrior, a sudden shout resounded. Then, a figure endured the pain from his legs and suddenly pounced on him like a ferocious tiger coming down from the mountain. His momentum was extraordinary. "You're courting death." The man in black with a torch in his right hand seemed to have expected this scene to happen. He just moved his body to the side and dodged the tiger's attack. Then, when the assassin's figure missed, a torch hit the assassin's back. Under the powerful force, the assassin spat out another mouthful of blood. This time, he completely fainted. This scene continued to happen. Men of sacrifice were men of sacrifice. They kept fighting back. Although they had lost the support of their legs, they still fought back. However, those men in black all seemed to have unique skills. Not only were none of them injured, but they all used a single move to subdue the killers who were still unwilling to give up. Once again, they knocked them unconscious on the ground. Among them, the most obvious one was the man in black who fought against Muong. Muong was allowed to lead the team. Needless to say, his skills were excellent. Therefore, although his legs were penetrated by bullets just now, he did not give up the last chance. When he endured the pain in his legs, he jumped up and rushed toward the man in black. He was full of confidence that his sneak attack would succeed. Although he did this, he still could not avoid the result of death. But it was probably the best result to be able to drag one of them down with him before he died. Although it was said that it would be faster if it was late, when he really attacked, Muong was disappointed again. The moment he flew up, he felt that something was wrong. Then he found that in the face of his absolute counterattack, his opponent did not panic. He even saw the disdain in his opponent's eyes under the moonlight. Then, facing his fierce attack, his opponent did not dodge. On the contrary, his opponent met his attack head-on with his left fist without a torch. Chapter 1580. Logically speaking, it was a good thing that the opponent didn't dodge. But for some reason, Muong had a bad feeling in his heart. Soon, his feeling became reality. The fist collided with his body, and then he felt his whole body fall apart, as if he was electrocuted. Then, he fell to the ground and fainted. But before he fainted, Muong vaguely saw a big foot stepping on his head. He didn't know what would happen next, nor did he have time to think about it, because he had already closed his eyes in pain. Okay, violent ape, this person's identity is important, we can't let him die now. A shout rang out behind him. Only then did the black-clothed man stop his foot that was about to land. Then, he fiercely stomped to the side, forcefully creating a shallow pit in the ground. Only then did he continue to walk forward, completing his mission of investigating the enemy. Sixth young master, Violent Ape is like this. He was born with great strength and a bad temper, but fortunately, he didn't ruin anything. Silver Hand wiped the sweat on his forehead and said nervously to Yang Chendong, "It's okay, as long as he doesn't die. Even if he does die, it's okay." Yang Chendong shrugged indifferently. This time, his backup plan was the soldiers of the Wolf Fang Special Forces. Over the years, the development of the Wolf Fang Special Forces wasn't fast. It could even be described as slow, but their strength was really terrifying. They spent most of their time on training, and their strength was terrifying. If it was just a one-on-one, even the black cavalry wouldn't be their opponent. It was precisely because of the high intensity of training that they were very strict when recruiting people, so the development speed wasn't fast. But their overall combat strength was really tyrannical. This time, Yang Chendong gave them an early order to hide in Yunnan Manor and wait for orders. Yang Chendong had a large warehouse, but he wasn't a reckless person. In order to be foolproof, he had double insurance before entering the city. For example, There was the Cold Front 1st Army's 1st Division's 1st Regiment lurking in the 3 Provincial Armies recruit camp, and there were nearly 300 Wolf Fang Special Forces members. Although there weren't many of them in total, they were the most powerful of them all. Since they were going to turn the enemy's stomach upside down, they would naturally choose quality over quantity. This time, there were a total of 130 Special Forces members who appeared at the Xingwang Temple. Each of them could fight against 10 or even dozens of people. They were well prepared and equipped with the most advanced firearms. It was only 300 assassins, and they could easily wipe them out. If it wasn't for the fact that he had to keep some of them alive to interrogate them, he would have finished off all of them with just 1 round of gunfire. Then again, even Mu Ang's counterattack was easily blocked. What was the use of the others struggling? It was as if Blow Stone had also launched a counterattack. His opponent was Steel Leg, unable to use the ninja's concealment jutsu. In just 3 rounds, he was kicked in the right arm. The bones in his arm were shattered, and he fainted. Under the encirclement of 130 Wolf Fang members, no one who resisted had a good ending. Those who underestimated the enemy were seriously injured and fainted. Those who were seriously injured were directly killed. It was a clean and quick death. Yang Qindong stopped paying attention to what was happening on the battlefield after he saw the members of Wolf Fang attacking so cleanly and efficiently. Since the people who should be lured out had been lured out, there was no need for him to hide any strength. It was also time to counterattack. Silver Hand, where's your captain? Reporting to the 6th young master. The captain is leading people to the periphery of the 3 provinces' king's mansion. He is just waiting for the order to enter the mansion to take the people. Silver Hand was arranged to cooperate with Yang Qindong to eliminate the assassins because he was rational in doing things. But in the Wolf Fang Special Forces, the real big brother was still the Captain Tai Hu. Okay, I will take 20 people away. The rest will be left to you. Clean up this place. When they wake up, interrogate them one by one. I want to know all the secrets in their hearts. Yang Qindong patted Silver Hand's shoulder and said so. Please rest assured, 6th young master, I promise to complete the task. This slap made Silver Hand extremely excited. He even noticed that the other team members were looking at him with envy. This was Yang Qindong, the soul of Yang Xia, the founder of the 5-Star Army, and also the founder of the Wolf Fang Special Forces. It could be said that everyone's current achievements were all thanks to Yang Qindong. A person who was like a god in their eyes actually patted him on the shoulder. How could his comrades not be envious? Yang Qindong didn't think so much. Instead, he had already left the Xingwang Temple under the protection of 20 members of the Special Forces and went straight to the 3 provinces' king's mansion. At the 3 provinces' king's mansion, the atmosphere was a little tense at the moment. The battlefield in the small courtyard couldn't be taken down for a long time. The people in the city began to join in. When the mutiny outside General Kai Wenju was killed, and so on were reported to Zhu Huituan, his face was already very ugly. He didn't expect things to turn out like this. Men, immediately take this king's tiger tally and mobilize the troops. Invite General Luo Guan, Rajiv, Azad, and hack from the Mengding Mansion to the Yunnan Mansion. No matter what, we must kill Yang Qindong. Go quickly. Zhu Huituan's voice was no longer as calm as it used to be. He couldn't help but be anxious. Once Yang Qindong escaped this time, he would be at a disadvantage righteously. In this way, the people of the 3 provinces who knew the truth would no longer believe him. Once they stood on Yang Qindong's side, how could he make a comeback? He wasn't afraid of the people, but an organized group of people was terrifying. Even if these people couldn't be used by him, they couldn't be used by Yang Qindong. But now, it seemed that he had underestimated the commoner's strength. To think that they had gathered an army of over 10,000 commoners right under his nose. What kind of means did they have to use to achieve this? Thinking of this, Zhu Huihua felt his scalp tingle. He felt as if a huge mountain was pressing down on him, making it hard for him to breathe. The best way to solve all of this was to kill Yang Qindong. Once this person was gone, the people would lose their nuclear core force, and it would be much easier to deal with them. In the end, Yang Qindong had to die. That's right, inform Wu Yingtu to immediately enter the city and cooperate with General Ming to take over the city's defense. Once the 5-star army appears outside the city, we must defend the city and wait for reinforcements. After thinking about it, Zhu Huituan decided that this Miao king would come in handy. Zhu Huituan didn't completely believe in the Miao people. Therefore, on the surface, it seemed like he put Wu Yingtu in an important position, but he didn't allow the Miao army to enter the city. He only allowed them to set up camp outside the city. But now, seeing that the situation in the city was getting out of control, he thought of the 10,000 Miao soldiers and decided to put them in an important position. After giving out a few orders, Zhu Huituan sat back on the throne, and his face looked much better. Next, he waited for news and battle reports from various parties. At the same time, he was also looking forward to the possibility that Wang Zhanjiang could kill Yang Qindong. Zhu Huituan didn't know that Yang Qindong had already left the courtyard in the dark. Not only that, but the 2 assassin teams that were most likely to threaten his safety were also eliminated. However, this wasn't the worst. The worst thing was that his mansion was surrounded. Even the slightest movement here couldn't escape the surveillance of the Langya Special Force led by Tai Hu. Just like the few messengers he sent out, it seemed like they had left the mansion and were safe. However, as soon as they walked into the nearby streets, they would be immediately intercepted and killed. It was still okay if they put down their weapons and surrendered, they could still live. However, anyone who resisted would be killed without mercy. In other words, all the orders in the mansion were only to enter and not to leave. After Yang Qindong arrived outside the mansion, the news couldn't even enter because there was no need to hide anything. They could directly lay their cards on the table. The 6th young master, Yang Qindong's appearance made Tai Hu and the others excited. Their eyes were filled with admiration. Although Tai Hu was the captain of the Langya Special Force and looked majestic, they were originally a special force that was independent of the 5-star army. In other words, their actions were not under the jurisdiction of the 5-star army. They didn't need to report their whereabouts. They were very mysterious and powerful. However, this was only in front of ordinary people. In front of Yang Qindong, these so-called arrogants could be removed one by one. It was because of Yang Qindong that the Langya Special Force had everything. It was also because of Yang Qindong's support that the Langya Special Force could be treated like this. Therefore, when facing the real founder of the Langya Special Force, Tai Hu and the others only had respect and obedience in their eyes. Well done! Yang Qindong had always been a person who was not stingy with his praise. When he walked to Tai Hu's side, his right hand naturally fell on his shoulder and gently patted him. Then, he asked about the situation in the mansion. Reporting to the 6th young master, there are a total of 3 doors in the mansion: the main door, the back door, and the side door. I have arranged people to watch over these 3 doors. I guarantee that when they come out, they will be killed. All their connections with the outside world have been cut off. Tai Hu straightened his body and made a simple report of the situation. Very good. Yang Qindong nodded with satisfaction after listening. How is the situation in the mansion? If we rush in now, how confident are we in controlling this place? Reporting to the 6th young master, Skinny Monkey has already gone in just now. The situation inside is basically clear. There are about 400 bodyguards of Zhu Huihua in the mansion. There are also more than 100 servants and servants in the mansion. They don't have much fighting power. Therefore, as long as the sixth young master gives the order, we have absolute confidence in controlling this place. However, there may be some movements. After all, no one knows if Zhu Huihua has other means of rescue. When Taihu said this, he didn't look very confident. Chapter 1581. To be able to become the king of 3 provinces, it was normal for him to have some tricks up his sleeve. However, if he was not wrong, he would only release smoke to warn others of the danger. However, since Yang Qindong had decided to make a move, he was naturally not afraid of others knowing. Moreover, Chushi had already said that there should be a person called Mo Gue in the palace. He was the most troublesome existence because he knew nothing about this person. He did not know if this person had any other tricks up his sleeve. Whatever, the city is already in chaos. Now that the citizens have joined the war, we can't wait any longer. Otherwise, we will lose our strength. Let's do it this way. Tell everyone to get ready. We will attack in 10 minutes. We must finish the battle in the shortest time possible. As for whether there will be any reinforcements, we don't have to worry about that. With the current situation, I want to see who will come to save the king of 3 provinces. Yang Qindong made his final decision. He had 500 black cavalry soldiers to defend a few small courtyards. Now that the palace was so big, he had more than 100 Wolf Fang Special Force soldiers. He was more confident in facing any unexpected situation. One must know that there was everything in the warehouse. At worst, he could take out a small portion of the weapons in the warehouse, and it would be enough to solve any problems. Not to mention, once Xu Huichun was taken down, the people of the 3 provinces would be in danger. Who would think that they would come to save him? Since Yang Qindong had said so, Taihu naturally did not have any doubts. After saluting, he immediately went to make arrangements. After the most elite Wolf Fang took action, they had already formulated 3 battle plans in just 10 minutes. This was to ensure that once an unknown situation occurred, they would be able to guarantee that they could immediately change the plan to solve the problem. 6th young master. When Taihu came in front of Yang Qindong again, his face was full of confidence. Let's do it. Yang Qindong, of course, knew that this was already prepared. He nodded his head. Let's do it. Taihu immediately turned around. Even though the sun had not risen yet, when he uttered those 2 words, hundreds of black shadows could be seen moving in different directions. They were advancing towards the prince mansions of the 3 provinces from 3 different directions. The battle outside was in full swing. Although the atmosphere in the 3 provincial palaces was a little tense, no one thought that there would be danger here. After all, the southern cloud manor was still in the hands of their king. Therefore, ordinary people were still doing what they were supposed to do. Many of the guards were still sleeping and resting. Only a portion of the guards were patrolling the mansion, but they were just walking around. When the members of the special forces suddenly appeared like ghosts, many of the guards fell to the ground before they could react to what had happened. Most of them had a fatal wound on their bodies. One of the weapons that the special forces members were most used to using was the 3-pronged bayonet. This type of weapon was already banned in the future. Its lethality was too great. Once one was injured by it, one would basically die from excessive bleeding. Scheming against the unsuspecting. With the strong attacking the weak, the patrolling guards didn't even have time to react before a third of them died. At this moment, someone finally reacted and began to shout loudly to warn the others. However, shouting at this moment wouldn't affect the overall situation. Even if the guards who were already resting woke up and took out their swords, they would only be able to hold on for a little longer. Not good, not good. a guard rushed into the main hall of the prince mansion and knelt down in front of the prince of the 3 provinces, Zhu Huichen. What's going on? Why are you so flustered? Zhu Huichen was unhappy. On the other hand, Chun Tian, who was standing at the side waiting for news, had an extremely ugly expression. This was because he could vaguely hear the battle cries, and it didn't seem to be far away. This made his scalp tingle. Reporting to your majesty, someone suddenly launched an attack on the prince mansion. The guards, what's wrong with the guards? Zhu Huichen walked forward impatiently and grabbed the guard's collar as he asked anxiously, "The guards can't hold on anymore." What? Hearing this, Zhu Huichen couldn't help but let go of his right hand and involuntarily took a few steps back until he came to Chun Tian's side. After being supported by Chun Tian, he stopped. However, his face was pale, and it was obvious that he was frightened. Even Chun Tian, who was behind him, wasn't any better. This was because he didn't expect that someone would have designs on the prince mansion at this time and harm the prince mansion. However, intuitively, he still didn't think that it was Yang Qindong's doing. This was Yunnan Manor, and the other party was surrounded in the small courtyard. Logically speaking, the other party should be unable to protect himself. Why would they come to find trouble with him? How would Chun Tian know that Yang Qindong's personal strength was strong? Under the dark sky, with his master-level movement technique, unless someone was watching him, it wouldn't be difficult for him to break out of the encirclement. Chun Tian didn't think that it was Yang Qindong's doing. He looked at the guard and asked, "Do you know who is coming? How many people are there?" "I don't know. Those people are too strong. Our guards aren't their opponents at all. We only held on for a while because of our advantage in numbers. However, now that we don't have the advantage in numbers, we can't hold on any longer. Your Majesty, please think of a way." The guard who reported the news shook his head. Under the dark sky, how could he have the time to observe those things? He was only here to report the news. On the other hand, Zhu Huichen was worthy of being the king of 3 provinces. He still had some courage. The panic just now was only because of the sudden incident. Now that he knew the situation outside, he immediately said, Go and set a fire. Inform the people outside that the prince mansion is in danger." "Oh." The guard responded and turned to leave. Zhu Huichen, who was left behind, grabbed Chun Tian's arm and went straight to the inner courtyard. A cunning rabbit has 3 burrows. Zhu Huichen killed his elder brother and younger brother. He also offended the southern Ming dynasty and Bugnam of Gojoseon. Under such circumstances, how could he not have a backup plan? For example, there was a secret basement in the prince mansion. The people who built the basement had been killed by him. Now, as long as he hid there, it would be difficult to be discovered. Zhu Huichen pulled Chun Tian and didn't take anyone else with him. He didn't even care about his family members. He quietly disappeared from the prince mansion and hid in a secret room. As the host, Zhu Huichen was prepared. However, as a guest, Mo Gui didn't have such conditions. When he learned that someone had killed their way into the prince mansion, he let out a long sigh. Then he went to the transmitter and started to send a message. This was the last telegram that Mo Gui could send. He had already thought of the content. However, he had been hoping that he wouldn't need to use the content in his life. But now, even the prince mansion of 3 provinces was about to be attacked. He knew that it was time. This was a telegram of desperation. Mo Gui sent the message that someone had killed their way into the prince mansion and that he would be killed soon. He also reported that Zhu Huichen was a good-for-nothing who was indecisive. That was why he had ruined the good situation. It was a mistake to ally with such a person. Yes, Mo Gui thought that Yang Chendong was going to die. There were only 500 people. So what if they were powerful? If Zhu Huiqiu came up to kill, he would directly send all the 50,000 troops in the city. Even if the other party had firearms under the absolute advantage of numbers, he would be able to break through the defense line and kill Yang Chendong. However, the stupid Zhu Huiqiu chose to capture Yang Chendong alive. As a result, he lost the initiative. When Mo Gui wanted to change his mind, it was too late. After that, Mo Gui expressed his gratitude to Uncle Ing for saving his life. He said that it was time for him to repay Uncle Ing for saving his life. He would die to repay Uncle Ying's kindness. After sending the telegram, Mo Gui dismantled the radio station and buried it where he had dug the hole. He didn't want people to know that there was a radio station here because it would make people think of Uncle Ing behind him and threaten the safety of some people. When he was done, the battle cries outside the door were getting closer and closer. Mo Gui smiled bitterly and took out a pill from his sleeve. He swallowed it without hesitation and closed his mouth. Clang! The door was pushed open and 2 special forces rushed in. It wasn't difficult for Langya to take down the entire prince mansion. In the end, all the guards in the mansion were killed. The few who surrendered survived. Unfortunately, they didn't find Zhu Huiqiu. Even Chen Tian, the civil official, was nowhere to be found. Bring Zhu Chongzhu here. Yang Chendong called the steward of the prince's mansion, who had been instigated by Yang San after failing to find anyone, and even searching twice carefully, came to no avail. Zhu Chongzhu came to Yang Chendong, trembling with fear. After knowing the identity of the person who came, he knelt on the ground and shouted, "Long live Bugnam of Gojoseon!" "Well, don't be afraid. You're one of us. We won't make things difficult for you. When we're done here, you can go to Yangxia and reunite with your sister. You're a meritorious official, so you'll be rewarded accordingly." After comforting him, Yang Chendong asked if there was a secret passage or a basement in the mansion. Although Zhu Chongzhu had been with Zhu Huiqiu for many years, he didn't know much about it. He shook his head and said, "Your Majesty, I really don't know about it." Yang Chendong was not surprised by this answer. After all, Zhu Huihua had even abandoned his wife and child. In other words, even his family members did not know the location of the secret passage, let alone a steward of the residence. "Well, you should know a man called Mo Gui, right?" "Oh, yes, the mysterious man you reported to Director Yang San." Chapter 1582. His name is Mo Gui. This humble one knows this person. Zhu Chongzhu, who had regained his senses, quickly replied, "Okay, bring him in." Yang Chendong waved his hand, and Mo Gui, who was pale, was carried into the yard and stood in front of Zhu Chongzhu. Zhu Chongzhu had indeed taken poison. The special forces were still a step too late and did not manage to save him. But even so, Yang Chendong still needed to confirm this person's identity. Once he was sure, he might be able to obtain some information by searching for this person's identity. Yes, he's the mysterious man. Zhu Chongzhu didn't know Mo Gui's name, but he had seen him before, so he recognized him immediately. "All right, thank you. You can go and rest now." Yang Chendong nodded. His gaze fell on the dead Mo Gui as he spoke regretfully. He was so close to catching this person. If he guessed correctly, this person should be the mole who reported Yang Xia's situation to Zhu Huiqiu. But he didn't know who ordered him to do so. Yang Chendong had a good memory. He thought about it carefully. It was definitely the first time he saw Mo Gui. It made sense. The mole was so careful that he couldn't find any clues even after investigating for a long time. Why would he send someone to contact Zhu Huiqiu? "Come, take care of this person's body, and get someone to draw a portrait." Yang Qindong still hoped that someone could recognize Mo Gue. Maybe there would be new clues. Sixth young master, our people found this radio in Mo Gue's yard. Tai Hu appeared, holding a dark green iron box. Oh! Yang Qindong's eyes lit up. Every radio station was a big warehouse item. When it was distributed, it had a serial number and was kept. Perhaps he could find some clues from this radio station. For example, the number 9826 was written at the bottom of the radio station. This was an important clue. Yang Qindong asked Tai Hu to keep it well and hand it over to Bureau Chief Yang San so that he could investigate it. By the way, what's the situation outside? Before Zhu Huichun disappeared, there was a big fire in the mansion. Everyone in the city must know that the mansion was in danger. If there were reinforcements, they should be here soon. Our brothers are watching outside. They haven't reported back yet, so there shouldn't be any reinforcements. Tai Hu replied respectfully. No reinforcements? He, then there shouldn't be any. After Yang Qindong heard this, a smile appeared on his face. Although it was already dark, it was impossible for the prince's mansion not to attract attention when it first caught fire and was followed by billowing smoke. If there were reinforcements, they would have been here long ago, but it had been half an hour, and no reinforcements were still not here, which meant there was a big problem. It would be best if there were no reinforcements. Even if there were, Yang Qindong would not be afraid. So this problem was quickly put to the back of his mind. He looked at Tai Hu and said, "Don't worry about the outside. Hurry up and find the secret passage or the basement. This king has a feeling that Zhu Huichun is still in the yard. He hasn't gone far." The reason why Yang Qindong dared to make such an assertion was naturally because he saw the location of the 3 provinces' king palaces. This was the central area of the city. The people living nearby were either rich or noble. If it was just digging a secret passage in the mansion, it could be done quietly as long as he was careful. But if he wanted to dig it out, it would be too difficult to not alarm the rich who valued safety. In addition, Zhu Huichun's position as the king of the 3 provinces was still very stable. There was no reason for him to take the risk of digging an escape passage. It was very likely that there was only a basement here. It was just for hiding. If this was the case, it was not difficult to find him. It just needed some time. Understood. After receiving the order, Tai Hu, who was in charge of the special forces, began to search the courtyards one by one. As long as there was a trace of suspicion, they would dig 3 feet into the ground to take a closer look. Let's not talk about finding the passage first. Let's talk about General Meng, who was also in the city. This general, who was entrusted with an important task by Zhu Huichun, was now standing on the wall of Yunnan Manor with a thoughtful expression. He naturally knew about the warning from the king palaces, but he did not send out troops to meet them. Speaking of which, Meng naturally had his own reasons for doing this. For example, he suspected that there should be a trap waiting for him around the king palaces. Once he went, he was afraid that not only would he not be able to save people, but he might also lose his life. He was naturally willing to do such a risky thing. Of course, the most important point was the second point, which was that Meng was dissatisfied with Zhu Huichun. Meng was previously under King Minzhuang, Zhu Huichun. At that time, Zhu Huichun was only King Guangtong. Later, this person rebelled, killed his own brother, and set up his own house. Meng followed him, but he was still only a general. Speaking of which, a general seemed to be very awe-inspiring. But in fact, those who understood the military structure of the 3 provinces knew that Zhu Huiyu had personally appointed several great generals, such as Yunnan's great general Luo Guan, Guizhou's great general Jiang Wuqing, Guangxi's great general Baikuan, and so on. Meng was also a general, which made him dissatisfied. No matter what, he had the merit of supporting the emperor. If he did not follow Zhu Huichun, but followed King Min Zhuang, how could there be the current king of the three provinces? Now, Zhu Huichun was the king of the three provinces, but he was still a general. He was also arranged to be by Zhu Huichun's side and was not allowed to lead troops alone. This obviously showed that Zhu Huichun did not trust him. Meng Neng remembered very clearly that Zhu Huichun had promised him before that once he achieved great things, he would be the general of the army. At that time, all the generals would be under his control. Only the word commander was added, but he could indeed become the highest commander in the army. Zhu Huichun's slip of the tongue made Meng Neng unhappy. Now, he was worried that there was an ambush in the king's mansion. So why would he take the risk? Pass down the order without a military order. No one is to act rashly. Meng Neng said thoughtfully. At this moment, Meng Neng was watching and waiting to see how the situation would develop. With military power, he was confident that no matter what the situation was, he could deal with it. As long as the main force of the five-star army did not appear, the initiative was in his hands. Outside the city, Wu Yingtu also received the report from the scouts and knew about the fire and smoke in the king's mansion. However, he made the same choice as Meng Neng. This did not mean that the two of them had the same thoughts, but he did not dare to act rashly without a command. He was different from Meng Neng. Meng Neng was Zhu Huichun's direct subordinate, at least he thought so. He was leading the Miao army. If he entered the city without a command, he would be punished severely. Thinking that it was better to avoid unnecessary trouble, he led the 10,000 soldiers and did not move. He only sent scouts into the city to gather information. He was also waiting for Zhu Huichun's military order. Before this, he was optimistic that Zhu Huichun had already made arrangements. Even if the king's mansion was on fire, if he was not there, who would know who was burning? Back to Wang Zhanjiang. At this moment, he could not even protect himself. The development of the situation was completely out of his expectations. The king's mansion that was in charge of his security had rebelled. Not only that, even General Cai Wenju was killed in the chaos. Without the help of the king's mansion, more and more civilians rushed in front of his army. After a round of fighting, the number of soldiers under Wang Zhanjiang's command was constantly decreasing. Originally, there were close to 20,000 soldiers, but now not even half of them were left. At this moment, even if he saw the king's mansion on fire, what else could he do? The three generals either did not help, waited, or were unable to protect themselves. This created enough time for Yang Chendong. The Langya team members checked one courtyard after another, getting closer and closer to Zhu Huichun's secret entrance. In the secret underground room, Zhu Huichun did not have a radio, so he did not know what was happening outside. He was optimistic that as long as he wasn't caught by the five-star army, it wouldn't be long before the emperor's army appeared. Then, the prince's mansion would be taken back, and he would be safe. Humph! I did not expect this Yang Chendong to have a trick up his sleeve. He actually wants to catch me. Just you wait. After this king quells the chaos, I will definitely cut you into pieces. Even in the secret room, Zhu Huichun was still cursing Yang Chendong, venting his dissatisfaction. The only one standing at the side, Chen Tian, also had a look of resentment. However, he saw deeper than Zhu Huichun. He said fawningly, "Your Majesty, actually it is not entirely a bad thing that the king's mansion is under attack. At least this Yang Chendong has revealed all his trump cards. Once our army surrounds the king's mansion, at that time he will not have any tricks up his sleeves. He will really be at our mercy." "Haha, well said." Zhu Huichun burst into laughter after hearing these words. However, Chen Tian also expressed his worry. "Your Majesty, I am afraid that Yang Qindong will not be able to find your Majesty." In his desperation, will he vent his anger on the people in the king's mansion? He won't. On this point, Zhu Huichun was very confident. This was also the reason why he only brought Chen Tian to the secret room and did not bring his family. He said confidently, "If Yang Qindong dares to harm my family, then his reputation will be tarnished for thousands of years. In this way, he will have no place to turn over. Furthermore, if he can't find this king, what is the use of taking my family? There's no way he doesn't understand this." This was the current situation of the Great Ming Dynasty, or rather, the current situation of the Han people under the influence of Confucianism. Here, the emphasis was on not harming the family. Chapter 1583. For Yang Qindong to have such achievements today, even if he were to die now, history would record him in detail. After all, he had shown the might of the Han people, which was worthy of affirmation. On the other hand, if he really touched Zhu Huilio's family, he would be completely morally stained. If that really happened, he would not be able to rest in peace even if he died. His family and loved ones would be ashamed of it. It was because he had thought this through that Zhu Huilu was so confident. That's good. If that's the case, the king has nothing to worry about. The king will definitely win. Chen Tian was also relieved. He was really afraid that Yang Qindong would not be able to defeat the enemy and would act against the families of the 3 provincial kings. However, after thinking about it carefully, the advantages outweighed the disadvantages. As long as Yang Qindong still had a shred of rationality, he would not do such a thing. Hearing the slogan that the king will definitely win, Chen Tian laughed out loud. "All right, let's see how Yang Qindong is captured alive, or how he dies. Does he really think that he can turn the situation around after taking down the prince's mansion? This proves that he can't hold on any longer. This is just his last act of madness. He is definitely going to lose." Yang Qindong, who Zhu Huilu thought was going to lose, was currently sitting on the throne where Zhu Huilu sat, quietly listening to Tai Hu's report. 6th young master, the 10,000 Miao soldiers outside the city did not act rashly because they did not receive any orders and did not know what was going on here. Actually, this is normal. However, why is that General Meng Nung also not moving? This is really hard to understand. Tai Hu looked as if he was asking for advice. After all, it was a rare opportunity to learn from Yang Qindong directly. Yang Qindong also thought highly of Tai Hu. If there was an opportunity to teach him, he would not be stingy. He first smiled, then said, "The development of everything in the world is not the same. Everyone has their own selfish motives. Obviously, this Meng Ning also has his own thoughts. Before figuring out why the prince's mansion was set on fire, he will not act rashly. I think he is afraid of falling into our ambush and wants to wait for the best price." But Zhu Huihua was his king. If his king was in trouble, shouldn't his subordinates immediately send troops to save him? Isn't he afraid that Zhu Huichen is really fine and will come back to settle old scores with him? Tai, who still didn't understand. Yang Qindong said patiently, "If it were any other time, of course I would be scared. But now was the most chaotic time. Moreover, if Zhu Huiying is fine, then something must be wrong with this prince. If that is the case, Yang Xie will definitely be in chaos. If Zhu Huilu wants to take advantage of this opportunity to gain benefits, he must have people around him. Meng Nung knows this and knows that he is still valuable, so he is not afraid that Zhu Huilu will turn against him. So that's how it is." Tai, who finally understood. Then he smiled and said, "But it's a pity that he doesn't know that not only is the 6th young master fine, but only a little over 100 of us from the special forces managed to take down the prince's residence. He's going to miss such a good opportunity to serve the emperor and perform well. Haha, that's right. Yang Qindong shared the same opinion. The prince's residence was not the courtyard he lived in. Because it was small, it was easy to defend. The prince's residence was big and had many walls. If Meng Nung led the army here, it would be impossible for him to defend this place. The best result would be for him to leave with his men. In this way, he would lose the chance to capture Zhu Huilu alive. It could be said that all his efforts would be in vain. However, Meng Nung did not seize this opportunity, which doomed the 3 provincial kings to defeat. While the 2 of them were still talking, the special forces on the other side were not idle. Other than leaving the necessary people to guard the 3 gates to prevent any accidents, the other members were carefully searching. Since Yang Qindong said that Zhu Huilu didn't run away, then he definitely wouldn't run away. As long as they searched carefully, they would definitely find the entrance to the secret passage. That would be the time for Wolf Fang to perform a meritorious service. Every member of the team was searching attentively, not wanting to leave any corner unturned. Among them, Skinny Monkey's movements were the fastest. Looking carefully, the members of Wolf Fang were all tall and strong. In comparison, Skinny Monkey, who weighed less than 50 kilograms, was an exception. However, not only did he become a member of Wolf Fang, but he was also the leader of Wolf Fang, Iron Tiger. This was because he had real skills in other aspects. For example, he was the one who entered the prince's residence to investigate. Relying on his small body, his qigong was very good, and he was also very agile. He was very suitable for spying. His skills were not difficult, but he also knew a lot of unorthodox ways. One of them was tomb raiding. Before joining Wolf Fang, he had followed others to rob tombs because of his small body. For example, he could squeeze into some narrow places. For this reason, he was more familiar with the structure of the underground secret passage than the other members. He led a small team of 10 people to search one house after another. His hand tapped on the first floor to see if it was different from the other floors. In this way, in a short period of time, when the others only searched 2 or 3 houses, he had already searched 7 or 8 houses with this method. Finally, he stepped into the house at the secret entrance. This was a storage room, and there were all kinds of daily necessities inside. A room like this looked no different from any other room. However, under Skinny Monkey's leadership, everyone still carefully checked every inch of the room. When he finally came to the corner of the room, in front of a pile of salt, he suddenly stopped. A faintly discernible shoe print was right below the salt bag. If it wasn't for the light of the torch, he was afraid that this oversight would have directly swept past it. Has anyone been here before? Skinny Monkey squatted down and asked the other members. Someone must have pushed the door open to check, but no one would search this corner. One of the team members answered aloud. Hee hee, this is interesting. Skinny Monkey agreed with this answer. It was because of this that his eyes became brighter. Someone move the salt bag away. Be careful. Skinny Monkey was their captain. After the captain gave the order, a member immediately came forward and moved the salt bag away, revealing a flat ground. Just from the appearance alone, it was impossible to tell that it was different from other places. If this is the entrance, it's really ingenious. The Skinny Monkey-like man smiled with great interest. Then he leaned forward and gently knocked on the floor a few times. A few echoes sounded, making a slightly crisp sound. This sound was completely different from the dull sound of knocking on the ground. When this sound came out, Skinny Monkey's smile became wider. Then he said with a very confident tone, "Go and call more people here. There's something here." This was also why Skinny Monkey was cautious. If the 3 provincial kings were really hiding here, In case there were any ambushes or traps, his group of 10 people was still too small. After Skinny Monkey gave the order, several groups of Special Forces members nearby rushed over. When the number of people reached 50, Skinny Monkey decisively got someone to find a heavy hammer and smashed it fiercely on the ground. He believed that there must be some kind of mechanism controlling this place, but he didn't have time to find it. He could only use the simplest method, violently smashing the door. Dang, 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 dang. Under the continuous smashing of the heavy hammer, a black hole with a diameter of nearly 1 meter appeared in front of everyone. At this moment, Skinny Monkey didn't need to say anything. A member suddenly jumped in and disappeared. In the underground secret room, Zhu Huiqi and Chen Tian were still talking about the outside world. From their conversation, they had already determined that the reinforcements were about to arrive, and they should be getting closer and closer to getting out. At this moment, a sound came out causing Zhu Huiqi and Chen Tian's faces to gradually turn ugly. Obviously, they had thought of something, but before they could do anything, the crashing sound stopped, and a figure appeared in their sight. Then, the skinny monkey-like figure jumped down and came to Zhu Huiqi and Chen Tian. Skinny Monkey had naturally seen Zhu Huiqi and Chen Tian before. When he saw the two of them, he couldn't help but grin. Capturing the two of them would definitely be a great achievement. Skinny Monkey suddenly appeared in the underground secret room from the sky, giving Zhu Huiqi and Chen Tian a shock. They didn't think that someone would discover their underground secret room. It should take a long time and extraordinary ability to find them, not to mention whether or not the 5-star army had such talents. They had only occupied the 3 provinces with a small number of soldiers. Now, they should be facing the various armies that came to rescue the emperor. How would they have the time to look for them? On the bright side, the 5-star army that occupied the prince's mansion should have been surrounded by the emperor's army or even killed. But what was going on now? At this moment, both Zhu Huiqi and Chen Tian's faces were very ugly. Chen Tian even intentionally rubbed his eyes. Obviously, even now, he still didn't think that all of this was real. Hee, the two of you don't have to doubt. You are now our captives. Of course, you can resist, but the consequences, will be very serious. Skinny Monkey said as he took out the military knife in his hand and played with it. It was as if he was saying, "If you dare to act rashly, I won't be polite." Both Zhu Huiqi and Chen Tian were smart people. So how could they resist at this moment? Especially Zhu Huiqi. He was the king of 3 provinces and was also a member of the Zhu family. Even if he fell into Yang Chendong's hands, he wouldn't dare to hurt him. Chapter 1584. Just like what Yang Chendong thought before. As the people of the great Ming dynasty, they had their own pride. Perhaps it was because they had not come into contact with the outside world. They were simply short-sighted and narrow-minded. In the eyes of these people, the great Ming dynasty was the whole world. Anyone outside of the great Ming dynasty was a barbarian. They should look up to the great Ming dynasty, especially the people of the Zhu family, who were incomparably proud and arrogant, even if Zhu Huiqi killed his brother. So what? That was their Zhu family's matter. Not to mention, he still had the title of the 3 kings. Based on this, as long as he didn't really rebel against the great Ming dynasty, even if he did something wrong, the emperor wouldn't do anything to him, let alone Bugnam of Gojoseon, who wouldn't dare to do anything to him. With this thought in mind, after a brief shock, Zhu Huiqi tidied up his robe and became arrogant again. Whereas Bugnam of Gojoseon, this king wants to see him. Seeing that Zhu Huiqi had given up the intention to resist, the skinny monkey-like man immediately laughed, turned around, and said, "Then please." When Zhu Huiqi reappeared in the main hall of the king's mansion, he was no longer the king, but a prisoner. Yang Qindong sat on the throne that Zhu Huiqiu was supposed to sit on and looked down. This made the three provincial kings very uncomfortable when they entered the hall. Cough, Bugnam of Gojoseon. This king admits defeat in your hands this time. Say, what do you want? Of course, this prince will consider giving Yunnan province to you, but that's all. As for Guizhou and Guangxi, they will still belong to this prince. This is the biggest concession I can make. You should also know that the southern Ming dynasty will not agree to more. After entering the main hall, Zhu Huiqin said to Yang Qindong in a warning tone, giving people the feeling that Bugnam of Gojoseon had taken advantage of him. He 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 he. Yang Qindong couldn't help but laugh out loud. At this time, Zhu Huiqin still wanted to use the southern Ming Empire to suppress him. Such a person's mind was completely corrupted by the great Ming Empire. If it was described in Yang Qindong's words, then it was hopeless. Zhu Huiyan didn't know about this. Seeing Yang Qindong laughing, he thought that the other party was very satisfied with this result. He couldn't help but heave a sigh of relief. No matter what, he was still a prisoner. Although he believed that with the southern Ming Empire as his backing and his surname being Zhu, Yang Qindong wouldn't have the guts to do anything to him. However, this was his own opinion. Who knew if this person would go crazy and suddenly attack him? Others might not know what kind of person he was in Nan Ming's eyes, but how could he not know? He killed his brothers and forced the southern Ming Empire to make him the king of 3 provinces. It was hard to say that Zhu Qizhen didn't have any thoughts at all. Perhaps he could borrow Yang Qindong's hand to kill him, and Zhu Qizhen might even be happy. All right, since that's the case, please send someone to send this prince out of the city. Don't worry. Since this prince has lost this time, I will admit defeat. I won't send anyone to seize Yunnan province. Zhu Huiyan thought that he had the upper hand and spoke with a magnanimous look. What he didn't know was that after these words, Yang Qindong couldn't help but laugh out loud again. When Chen Tian heard this laughter, his expression changed drastically. He had dealt with Yang Qindong more than once or twice, and he had never really gained any advantage. He didn't think that the other party would let things go so easily now that he had the initiative. Your Majesty, please don't say any more. Chen Tian felt that something was wrong. He stretched out his right hand and gently tugged on Zhu Huiyun's sleeve as he reminded him softly, "HM, what's going on?" Zhu Huiyun also felt that something was wrong, but he couldn't figure it out. There was no need for Zhu Huiyun to figure it out because Yang Qindong had already opened his mouth and said, "Let you go? Zhu Huiyun, has your brain been eaten by a dog? Can't you see the situation clearly at this time?" "Ah, Yang Qindong, how can you say that? I'm a member of the imperial family with the surname Zhu, and I'm also the southern Ming Emperor's king of the 3 provinces. How can you slander me here? Are you not afraid of angering the southern Ming dynasty and sending an army to destroy you?" When he spoke to this point, Zhu Huiyun's voice unconsciously dropped a lot. In terms of righteousness, Yang Qindong was a subject of the great Ming dynasty. However, in reality, the current Yang Xie was already many times stronger than the great Ming dynasty. It was just that some people were unwilling to admit it. Then there was the problem. Even if Yang Qindong really did something to Zhu Huiyan, what did he do? Would the southern Ming dynasty start a war with Yang Xie because of this matter? Not to mention whether they could win or not. In the eyes of the southern Ming dynasty, Zhu Huiyan was not someone to be trifled with. He was not much different from a traitor. They probably wanted the 2 of them to fight. So how could they meddle in other people's business? This was also the reason why Zhu Huiyun's voice was getting softer and softer. After saying this, his aura was no longer as strong as before. Humph! Seeing that Zhu Huiyun had become more obedient, Yang Qindong began to flip out. Zhu Huiyan, who do you think you are? If you didn't have a good family, what are you now? For power, you even killed your own brother and brother. Aren't you afraid that you won't be able to enter your ancestral grave after death? Aren't you afraid that they are waiting for you on the ground with resentment? Zhu Huiyan, this time, you invited this king to discuss matters. You said that as long as this king came and expressed his sincerity, you would give the 3 provinces to this king. You also said that this would prevent the people of the 3 provinces from experiencing the flames of war. Look, you make it sound so nice, but what is the truth? When Yang Qindong said the word, his voice raised by more than 2 octaves. Because of this, Zhu Huiyun's body trembled, and his head lowered even more. However, Yang Qindong had no intention of letting him off easily. He continued to say, "The truth is, ever since this king entered Yun Nan Manor, you have always wanted to kill this king. You launched fierce attacks again and again. If it weren't for this king's strong warriors, I'm afraid that this king would be dead by now and end up like your brother and brother. Since you wanted to kill this prince, and now you've been captured by this prince, then tell me, do you think this matter will be resolved so easily? What do you want to do? Don't tell me you still want to harm this king?" Hearing this, Zhu Huiyan could no longer be an ostrich. "Harm you? Bah, you don't deserve it." Yang Qindong shook his head, then said in a resolute and unquestionable tone, "What's the difference between killing you and killing an ant? When the time comes, this king only needs to tell the world that you were afraid because you did something wrong and committed suicide in the king's mansion. I'm sure this result will convince a lot of people and make many people believe it. At that time, tell me, who will care about a dead person?" No. Zhu Huiyun's face changed drastically. It was not wrong for him to like power. In order to obtain power, he would do anything and kill countless people. However, this did not mean that he was not afraid of death. Killing others and being killed by others were 2 completely different concepts and results. "What's wrong? Are you afraid?" Seeing Zhu Huiyun's pale face, Yang Qindong knew that he had warned him enough. Next, it was time to ask for the result, which was what he wanted to know the most. Compared to this result, Zhu Huiyun's life and death really did not matter to him. He was just a king with the surname Zhu in the Great Ming Dynasty. In today's Great Ming Dynasty, there were dozens, if not hundreds of kings like him. However, many of the kings were just in name. Not many people had the military power of 3 provinces like Zhu Huiyan. So what if he had the military power of 3 provinces? For Yang Qindong, who had already occupied Eastern Europe, the grasslands, Southeast Asia, and Central Asia, these 3 provinces had never been in his eyes. "Zhu Huiyan, this king just wants to tell you that killing you is like killing an ant to this king. It's not a problem at all. Of course, if you can cooperate with this king and tell me everything you know, this king can still consider sparing your life." This, Yang Qindong threw out an olive branch, but Zhu Huiyan did not immediately agree. He was still wondering if Yang Qindong was trying to scare him. Without getting an answer immediately, Yang Qindong's eyes flashed with anger. Then his gaze fell on Beta Persei beside him. The 2 had been together for many years and had already formed a certain tacit understanding. Beta Persei nodded, then strode into the hall and came to Zhu Huiyun's side. Without any explanation, he raised his hand and slashed down. An arm fell in the hall, and a wail from the bottom of his heart sounded. It hurts, it hurts." The voice came from Chen Tian's mouth. The slash just now had cut off his left arm. This sudden slash was completely out of Zhu Huiyun's expectations. When he saw the bloody arm falling at his feet, he instinctively jumped to the side. But at the same time, cold sweat began to flow from his forehead unknowingly. After Beta Persei swung his sword, His gaze fell on Zhu Huiyan, as if to say, "What do you think? Do you want me to slash you too?" Although Beta Persei did not say anything, everything was just a warning from his eyes. But Zhu Huiyan did not dare to take the risk. He immediately shouted, "Don't kill me! Don't kill me! Bugnam of Gojoseon, whatever you want to ask, I'll say it, I'll say it." In fear and horror, Zhu Huiyan did not even have the courage to call himself this king. Yang Chendong smiled with satisfaction and said, "This prince will give you a chance. Tell me about Emo Gui. Who is his master?" Emo Gui nodded. Yang Chendong didn't know what to say, but he didn't know what to say. Chapter 1585. Compared to the external threat, Yang Chendong was more concerned about the traitor. He wouldn't be able to sleep peacefully until the traitor was eliminated. Now that Emo Gui was dead, the only person who had interacted with him was Zhu Huiyan. He had to get an answer from this person. With Chun Tian's missing arm in front of him, Zhu Huiyan naturally answered all the questions. However, he knew very little about Emo Gui, but he didn't dare to not answer, nor did he dare to speak carelessly. He could only give a detailed account of the first time he met Emo Gui and the last time he met him. An hour passed. When he was done, Zhu Huiyan spread his hands and said, "I only know that there is a mysterious force supporting Emo Gui. As for who it is, I really don't know." Yang Chendong naturally believed him. He didn't expect Zhu Huiyan to be so careful. Emo Gui had never mentioned the identity of his master. He originally thought that he would be able to find traces of his master. Now it seemed impossible. However, even though he believed that Zhu Huiyan wouldn't lie to him, it didn't mean that he wouldn't ask more. Chun Tiangong's bleeding had been stopped, and Yang Chendong had put the same problem on him. Chun Tian didn't know as much as Zhu Huiyan. However, in order not to get hurt again, he told Zhu Huiyan everything he knew. The facts proved that Zhu Huiyan wasn't lying. This result made Yang Chendong unhappy. There were still no clues about the traitor. Yang Chendong could only put it aside. Now that things had come to this, it was better to solve the problem of the 3 provinces first. Zhu Huiyun's capture meant that the overall situation was settled. Now, it was time to tie up the loose ends. Chun Tian, I'll give you a mission. If you complete it well, you can live. If you don't need to keep your other arm. Chun Tian's face was still pale because he had lost too much blood and also because he was scared. After knowing that Yang Chendong was daring and did not take him seriously, Chun Tian became as obedient as a dog and said, "Please instruct me, Bugnam of Gojoseon." Satisfied with Chun Tian's performance, Yang Chendong said, "I now order you to be this king's envoy. Go and meet General Ming and persuade him to surrender." The prince's mansion was on fire, followed by thick smoke. This was a call for help. Everyone who saw this scene had different thoughts. However, there was one person who wanted to go back to help, but he no longer had the ability to do so. This person was General Wang Zhanjiang. Wang Zhanjiang was a typical general of the Great Ming dynasty. He had a foolishly loyal heart. In his eyes, she had received Zhu Huiyun's kindness, so she was his person in life and his ghost in death. Therefore, he was more anxious than anyone else when he saw that the Wang residence was in trouble. However, with the black cavalry firing their muskets on the inside and the traitorous soldiers and civilians on the outside, he was caught in the middle and was in a dilemma. If he couldn't even protect himself, how could he save others? Charge, send everyone. No matter what, we have to rush into the small courtyard. As long as we capture Bugnam of Gojoseon, everything will be solved. Wang Zhanjiang thought of the simplest way to solve everything, which was to capture Yang Chendong alive, and then use him to exchange for the 3 provinces' king. Wang Zhanjiang gave orders like a madman, then led the army to charge. Under his lead, the remaining 10,000 soldiers of the 3 provinces' army rushed toward the small courtyard like a tide. Even though they were constantly hit by firearms and fell to the ground in the process of charging, the tide of people was still like a wave without stopping. The power of firearms was greater in deterrence. When the opponents came without regard for their lives, the black cavalry, which had less than 500 people, finally felt a strong pressure. "Second brother, we can't go on like this. Let's break through." Dao Xiao hurriedly came to Beta Persei's side to ask for instructions. Up until now, the black cavalry soldiers' arms were sore, numb, and swollen. Anyone who had been in the military or had experience with guns would know that shooting a gun was a very physically taxing thing. The continuous gunshots were also a test of the human body's physical fitness. This was because the black cavalry soldiers had better physical fitness. If it were an ordinary person, they would have been unable to shoot because their arms could not bear the force. A small number of the 500 black cavalry soldiers were injured, but most of them had reached their physical limits, especially when their arms were numb and they could no longer shoot. Even if they forced themselves to hold the gun, they had already lost their aim. Then let's break through. Beta Persei was also a little surprised by the stubbornness of the 3 provinces' army. But fortunately, the young master was no longer here, so he did not have to stay here and not move. Organize those who can still shoot and let them be responsible for covering the retreat of the others. We'll break through to the east. After Beta Persei gave the order, those who were supposed to set up the booby traps did so. The soldiers who were supposed to retreat also lined up, and the injured soldiers were supported by their comrades to the east. Beta Persei's decision was very decisive and caught the 3 provinces' army off guard. The east side was the main target of the attack, and a hole was quickly opened. Beta Persei and the others took the opportunity to leave. General Wang Zhanjiang, who was left behind, finally rushed into the small courtyard with the soldiers. "Quick, surround this place. Don't let a single one escape." Finally, he rushed into the small courtyard. At this moment, Wang Zhanjiang's face was full of excitement. He seemed to see the scene of capturing Yang Qindong alive, and then saving Zhu Huituan, becoming the first hero. Boom, boom, boom. Boom, boom, boom. The booby traps left behind were triggered, causing a series of explosions. Hundreds of soldiers from the 3 provinces' army were killed or injured by the explosions. But Wang Zhanjiang did not care about all of this. In his eyes, all of this was just the black cavalry's last resistance. "Quick, charge in. They don't have any power to resist. Charge in. Other than Wu Nanwang, kill everyone else. Kill them all." After losing so many people, he could finally get his revenge. Wang Zhanjiang had been suppressing his anger for a long time, but it was destined that his idea would not come true. When Wang Zhanjiang rushed into the small courtyard with the soldiers from the 3 provinces, he saw that there was no one there. Not to mention Yang Qindong's figure. There was not even a corpse of a dead 5-star army soldier. What's going on? Faced with this result, Wang Zhanjiang felt his mind go blank. He could not understand why this was happening. Reality did not give him more time to think, because soon after, a soldier came to report that the courtyard was surrounded by the rebel army and civilians. In other words, they were now the prey and had nowhere to run. How many people do we have left? Wang Zhanjiang's face changed when he heard that they were surrounded, but he did not give up on the idea of breaking out. As long as he still had his strength, there was still a chance for him to break out. "General, we only have about 3,000 people left." This answer made Wang Zhanjiang's face change. Then, like a zombie that had its energy sucked out of his body, he fell to the ground with a plop. He knew that this time it was completely over. Nearly 15,000 soldiers fought with no regard for their lives and did not care about the heavy losses. Until now, there were only about 3,000 people left. On the contrary, there were more than 20,000 rebels and civilians outside. He knew that this was a complete failure. Wang Zhanjiang did not believe that the 3,000 people he brought with him would have the strength of the Black Cavalry to be able to break out of the heavy encirclement. The general had lost his fighting spirit and hope. The other soldiers looked at each other and also lost their fighting spirit. Some of them even looked at Wang Zhanjiang and were ready to make a move. It was every man for himself, and it was time for him to fight for himself. A few hours later, around noon, the soldiers under Wang Zhanjiang's command rebelled, and he was killed in the courtyard. No one would have thought that the place that was supposed to be Yang Qindong's burial ground would become Wang Zhanjiang's burial ground. With Wang Zhanjiang's death, the remaining soldiers from the 3 provinces abandoned their weapons and surrendered. They were taken over by Cheng Hu's soldiers and civilians. This was not the only piece of good news. Qin Tian also brought Meng Ning over. After learning that the 5-star army could keep him and his family alive, and that he could keep 10% of the wealth for his own use, Meng Ning chose to surrender. The exception was the 10,000 Miao soldiers outside the city. Under the leadership of Miao King Wu Yingtu, they escaped in advance. Clearly, he also saw that the situation was turning for the worse. However, considering the various conflicts he had with the 5-star army, he did not believe that the other party would let him off so easily. Thus, he chose to flee, choosing to head to the Chuxiong Manor to meet up with General Luo Guan, Brigadier General Rajiv, Azad, Hack, and the others. In just one night, Yunnan Manor changed hands. The original owner, Zhu Huihua, became a prisoner, and Yang Qindong, who was surrounded and killed, became the owner here. Beta Persei rushed to Yang Qindong with a telegram and reported, "Young master, the latest news is that 80,000 enemies have appeared in the west of the city. They are heading towards Yunnan Manor. If there are no accidents, they will reach the west wall in 2 hours." Previously, Beta Persei led the Black Cavalry to break out of the encirclement and then met up with Commander Cheng, who and the others who were outside. Then he came to the 3 provinces and walked to Yang Qindong's side. It was also because of Beta Persei's timely breakout that the Black Cavalry did not suffer any major losses. After a few days of fighting, the 500 Black Cavalry only lost 3 people in battle, and more than 20 were injured. Most of the soldiers were just overly tired. Once they had enough time to rest, they would immediately be full of energy. 80,000. After Yang Qindong heard this, his expression did not change. He knew that this was the last force that Zhu Huihua left in Yunnan province. There was nothing to be afraid of against an enemy that had no backup. As long as they defended the city and stabilized the situation, victory would eventually be theirs. You're tuning into the Mystic Fist YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.